SWAT in Another World. Chapter 11, First Quest. Smoothing things out with Marcus hadn't been too hard. Things were still a bit shaky between them, and they still disagreed on the subject of eliminating those who knew their secret and meant them harm. But both men respected each other's judgment, and both agreed that the ideal scenario was to never have to go through that, to never have to make that choice. When he'd told Jesse, Aaron, Chris, and Eddie about this decision, Jesse and Aaron agreed almost immediately, saying it was the best thing to do. Eddie looked uncomfortable, but also seemed to think the pragmatic approach was the right one. Chris didn't voice his opinion, but it was clear he was uncomfortable with it. They were all sitting around a circular polished oak table now. The crystal chandelier above hung almost within arm's reach, casting long shadows across their faces while they ate in the compact dining room. Lella had apologized for forcing them to eat in such cramped confines, but Jared found that he felt more secure like this, with a solid wall to his back and his eyes fixed right on the door ahead. Steam rose from platters of roasted meat and root vegetables as they ate dinner together. The food had been brought up to them by Lella herself, her baggy eyes still just as exhausted as the first day they had met her. Gagan had turned in for an early night, the long day of talking at the lectern having taken a toll on his lower back, leaving the boys to themselves. Jesse sat with his usual straight-backed posture as he ate, his lean, wiry build almost mirroring Marcus. Close-cropped dark hair framed a face that was all angular, sharp lines. It was hard to believe that Ramirez was so lean now, especially when he'd practically been a pudgeball in college. A thin scar traced the length of his right forearm, a line of white against his deep bronze skin. His hands, calloused and steady from years of weapons handling, moved with precise economical motions as he sliced into his steak, only chewing the piece twice before swallowing the chunk of meat. Jared had no clue how Jesse hadn't choked to death yet with eating habits like that. Chris's green eyes narrowed in apparent disgust at Jesse, his posture relaxed but always ready to move. He had a lean frame and regulation short black hair that contrasted with his pale skin. His square-like face had earned him a lot of mockery back in the academy, a lot of people having nicknamed him Steve because of it. Hell, even Jared had gotten in on the joke, asking Chris to come and wire up some redstone for his kitchen. He didn't talk to Jared for like a month after that, but that was a long time ago. Chris had grown a thicker skin over the years, no longer bristling at the old nickname. Back in the academy, merely mentioning Minecraft in his presence had been enough to make him storm off, red-faced and getting all huffy. He cut into his steak precisely, making perfect square slices, taking off bits at a time and chewing slowly. Aaron sat quietly at the edge of the table. He was the shortest of the squad, with a thin build that belied surprising power. His blonde hair was trimmed short, showing early streaks of grey at the temples, a sandy beard of stubble covering his face. He had deep-set blue eyes that missed nothing, flickering from plate to door constantly. Back in the academy, he'd always been a slacker, one of those kinds that never studied but passed every single test anyway, a lazy genius, much to Mark's chagrin. Now he was more stern and serious, but every once in a while his true attitude would show itself with strange, and most times inappropriate jokes. He ate with efficient, methodical motions, every slice of his knife low-key and controlled. Eddie himself had already finished his meal, leaning back with a satisfied grin on his face as Marcus continued to pick at his meal. They had all started speaking in Fayesh to one another, instead of English, to familiarize themselves more with the language, and the result was that they now sounded native. It had been only a couple of days, as Gagan had predicted, and not a trace of the English language was still in their pronunciation. They needed to make it a habit now, as English couldn't be spoken while they were here. Aaron leaned back in his chair, running a hand through the sandy stubble at his chin. Almost ready to get out of here. You'll think I should shoot my shot with Lella before then, or what? Eddie snorted, his massive shoulders shaking. You're like half a head shorter than she is, man. Aaron narrowed his eyes, jaw tightening. At least I'm not obese. Eddie leaned forward on his forearm, the wooden table creaking under his weight as he glared back. Careful, princess, or I'm going to have to stuff you in the pocket. The two men held their glares for a heartbeat before both erupted into laughter that echoed off the dining room walls. Jesse shook his head, knife pausing over his plate. Can't believe you're trying to get with a girl in another dimension, man. Aaron shrugged. She's wife material. Jared snickered, causing Aaron to swivel toward him, brows raised. And what's so funny, Jer? Dude, you say that about every hot chick that talks to you, Jared said flatly. Aaron's lips curled into a smile. Well, I mean, it's true every time, isn't it? Chris's green eyes fixed on Aaron from across the table. Bro, do you remember Bailey? You said she was wife material, and that was after she tried to stab you. Aaron shrugged, his knife glinting as he gestured. I don't know. That's kind of hot. You're a crazy person. Eddie shook his head, fingers drumming against the polished oak. I dated a Hello Kitty girl once, and even she didn't try to kill me. You got problems. You're ugly too, by the way. Aaron scoffed. Coming from you. Your face looks like a cutting board, man. A really ugly cutting board. Yeah, well, your mum is a cutting board, Eddie snickered. Aaron gasped, pointing his fork across the table. I'm gonna tell her you said that. Eddie's eyes widened, his massive frame suddenly tensing. Hey man, it was just a joke. Don't be telling her that. It'll hurt her feelings. Maybe don't say stupid shit all the time, Jesse remarked, his angular face hardening without a hint of humor. All right, Jesse, Eddie glared back. I see you're getting started early on being a bitch today. It's evening, you moron, Jesse snapped. Jared shook his head, setting down his knife with a soft clink. Boys, come on, not right now. Jared didn't know why, but Eddie and Jesse just did not get along. In all the years he'd known them, they'd just been like oil and water, and he couldn't see any real reason for it. Neither of them would talk about why, but there was some personal history between them that he wasn't privy to. He was decently close to both men, but neither would say a thing about why they were at odds. The rare times when all the boys had free time, they would organize cookouts or go to a restaurant, but doing so meant excluding one or the other, because they would always end up arguing like this. They had never come to blows, thank God, but there was a clear underlying tension between them. If they didn't work so well together in operation, they wouldn't be on the same team, and they wanted to be with the other guys too. So they managed and usually tried to stay out of each other's bubbles, but recent events had forced them into closer proximity. Chris leaned back in his chair, a mischievous glint in his green eyes. You two should just kiss already, man, he snickered. Seriously. Eddie's broad finger shot across the table toward Chris, the calloused tip hovering inches from his face. If you ever say that again, he began, tone deadly serious despite the smile tugging at the corner of his mouth, I'll kiss you. Chris blinked twice. You're gonna do, huh? Eddie's lips curled into a predatory grin before his tongue slid slowly across them, leaving a wet sheen that caught the orange light. Chris visibly shuddered, shoulders tensing beneath his shirt. You heard me, boy, Eddie rumbled, leaning forward until his massive shoulders cast a shadow over his plate. I'm feeling romantical. Jared couldn't help himself and burst out laughing, the sound echoing off the wooden walls. The rest of the table joined in, even Jesse's usually stern face cracking into a reluctant smile. All save for Chris, who shook his head, ears reddening. You're gay, man. Nuh-uh, Eddie countered, thumping his fist on the table hard enough to make the cutlery jump. Jared wrote me a license the other day, saying that if I do anything gay, it automatically becomes straight by default. A license to kiss, if you will. Jared fixed him with a deadpan stare, voice dropping an octave. You clearly didn't read the small text on the back. Marcus glanced up from his barely touched meal, the first time he'd looked away from his plate all evening. Yeah, it read that if you want to kiss a man, it reverts you being gay, he said quietly. Jared felt a wave of relief wash over him at hearing Mark join the banter. The man still wouldn't make eye contact, his shoulders still rigid beneath his shirt, but it seemed he was warming up bit by bit. Eddie shook his head. Nuh-uh, 'cause if you read the smaller text under that small text, I added a clause that says that me wanting to kiss men makes it straight because... He trailed off, his confident expression faltering. Aaron straightened in his seat, adjusting an imaginary tie before addressing Jared with exaggerated formality. Your Honor, clearly the defendant is scrambling to make up false information to defend his innate desire to kiss men as being straight. I implore you to please dismiss this case and officially label Eddie as gay. Eddie's dark eyes locked onto Aaron. "You better be careful, Aaron, or I'll kiss you too," he threatened, puckering his lips before rising from his chair. Aaron scrambled out of his chair, nearly knocking it over as Eddie advanced. "Your Honor," Aaron cried, genuine panic flashing across his face. "Send out the bailiff." Jared shrugged, the corner of his mouth quirking up in a smirk. Bailiff machine broke. "It what?" Aaron questioned, dodging back from Eddie with exaggerated panic, his boots scuffing against the wooden floor. "Get this freak away from me." "Pucker up, Buttercup," Eddie snickered, his broad shoulders hunched forward, long arms blocking all escape. Chris cut off Aaron's retreat, arms spread wide like a goalkeeper, giving Eddie time to lunge forward and clamp both massive hands onto Aaron's shoulders. "No!" Aaron wriggled in the vice-like grip. "He's gonna make me gay." "Save me," he whined, his eyes crinkling at the corners despite his protests. The guys all started laughing raucously, tears forming at the corners of their eyes. This was just like back in their younger days. The levity was more than welcome, his face beginning to hurt from how much he was smiling. Right before Eddie's lips could touch Aaron's stubbled cheek, though. The door swung open with a creak, and standing in the doorway was Lela, her baggy eyes wide, jaw going agape. Everything seemed to freeze for a moment, and Jared pinched his brow. Of course, she had to come in when they were all acting like teenagers. Eddie straightened, both literally and metaphorically, after a brief pause, stepping away from Aaron, who put his hands behind his back, drawing himself up to his full height. "Sup, girl," he grinned, his earlier panic evaporating instantly. "We're just, didn't mean to interrupt you," Lela replied before slowly shutting the door, her slender fingers gripping the edge. "Wait, we were just messing around," Aaron explained, rushing forward before wedging his boot in the doorway. "Right." Lela drew her lips to a line, her pale face unreadable. "Just messing around," she said flatly. "It okay if he's your lover?" "No," Aaron insisted, his voice cracking slightly. "We were just being goofy, just being guys, you know?" Lela just stared for a moment before shaking her head, her dark hair swaying slightly. "I'm afraid that I don't. Are Outworlder men typically infatuated with one another?" "He came on to me first of all," Eddie sighed, putting his hands on his hips with a smug grin stretching across his face. "Then he started playing hard to get." Aaron's head slowly turned toward Eddie, his eyes wide with open fury, nostrils flaring. "So you're saying that you're just, messing with each other?" she asked, fidgeting with the sleeve of her robe. "Do men act as lovers for humor?" Sometimes," Aaron answered, turning back to her, shoulders slumping. "I don't understand why that's funny." Lela shook her head, her brow furrowed. "But very well, listen, I know it's late, but—" She fidgeted, opening the door slightly, the hinges groaning. Jared's eyes narrowed as he leaned forward, the chair creaking beneath him. "Is there something wrong? You look nervous." Lela let out a sigh. "It's nothing. Likely my imagination, but I swear I heard rustling in the archive chambers, and well, it's just me down there." Her gaze flicked nervously between them before settling on Eddie. "There aren't golems set in the archives, and the ones in the lobby wouldn't investigate if I asked, and you're all, large. Could you please check? I need to go in there, but She hesitated. "I'm scared." Jared leaned forward, brow furrowed. "Are we allowed to do that? I thought we had to stay on the second floor no matter what." Lela's eyes darted to the floor. "Well, yes, but—" She sighed, shoulders slumping. "You're right, it's probably nothing. Sorry for bothering you." "No, hold on, we'll go check it out." Jared rose to his feet, chair scraping against the floor. "Just a quick sweep, we'll clear all corners." "I shouldn't let you," she said, interlocking her hands. "That would be breaking the rules." Eddie pushed his plate aside. "Listen, just go back to your counter. If you hear boots behind you and that door opening, don't look back. People are probably going to check it out later." "What do you mean? Do you mean yourselves? Why wouldn't you just use the stairs? You have direct access." Her eyes widened with sudden understanding. "I mean, if these hypothetical people were to walk behind me, why not take the stairs? They'd avoid the lobby entirely." "Because stairs aren't optimal for these guys," Chris added with a knowing look. Marcus nodded, the ghost of a smile crossing his face. "If there's something dangerous, these hypothetical people could be attacked. A single doorway is safer. They'd be exposed on the stairs. I see. A small conspiratorial smile crept across Lella's face. Well, if these people were to do this little errand, I'd consider it a quest and offer a proper reward. She glanced over her shoulder. Off the record, of course. The guys exchanged quick glances before turning back to Lella. Sounds good, Jared said with a smile. We'll scare off the boogeyman. Chapter 12. Yellow Jackets. Jared led the stack towards the door, now donned in their full tactical gear and wielding their long guns. Sure, it wasn't likely to be anything serious in there, but there was no reason to head in underprepared. Lella made a point of staring straight ahead past the counter, not looking back to see them as they stacked up by the door. She wasn't in line of sight for anyone potentially within the archive once they opened the door, thankfully, though the rarity of proper firearms in Violend put him somewhat at ease. Not completely, though. His lessons with Gagan, along with Deldy's memories, made it clear that firearms were very real in this world. Sure, he'd already learned that, but he hadn't known the specific details about thunderstaves. Perhaps there could be a way for them to make some more ammunition at some point. He shook his head. Now wasn't the time to be thinking about that. There was an op in progress. Eddie took up position just before the door, shield raised, Marcus on the left side and Chris on the right side. Chris wouldn't be using the ram today. They didn't want to damage the property, and it wasn't like it was locked anyway. It was surprisingly tense, arranging everyone like this again. They hadn't done an op in a while, and sure, this wasn't officially an operation, but there was something about donning tactical gear after days' downtime. The rifle felt heavier in his hands, his plate carrier was near suffocating, whereas before it had basically been a second skin. His helmet chafed, among other things. The guys seemed equally unsteady in their gear, shuffling where they hadn't before, adjusting their boots or other parts of their get-up. Had they really gone rusty just from a few days without a raid? Jared locked eyes with Chris, then tapped 2 fingers against his own chest before extending them toward the door. Chris's hand gripped the doorknob, looking to the rest of the guys. Eddie sank into a practiced crouch behind his shield, the rest of the squad prepared to cover every angle of the doorway as soon as it opened. Jared then signaled Chris open it, and Eddie rushed in, Marcus following him and covering his flank. The rest of the stack followed, all pushing into the chamber, their flashlights illuminating the dimly lit archives. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary, until Jared's eyes landed upon an upturned stack of papers. There were other signs of vandalism scattered here and there, ancient leather-bound tomes ripped apart at their spines, parchment edges chewed to pulp and slick with viscous yellowish saliva that reeked like pepperoni. Leather bookmarks dangled like flayed skin from half-devoured texts. Entire folios had been gutted, their covers discarded like hollow shells, while the pages within had vanished completely, not even scraps remaining to hint at their contents. Lella had not been imagining things. Jared's gloved hand flashed a series of precise gestures, index finger circling, then jabbing toward the scattered papers, palm flat with a downward push, signaling caution. The team acknowledged with sharp nods as they continued on, long guns at the ready. They advanced in formation, boots silent against the stone floor, weapon-mounted lights cutting through the musty darkness. Each operator cleared their sector with practiced economy, muzzles tracking smoothly from floor to ceiling, sweeping the towering oak bookshelves that loomed 15 feet high. The ancient shelves were deep enough that a man could lie flat across them. Perfect tweaker hiding spots. That added with the fact that these shelves were easily climbable only added to his paranoia. There could be someone up above, waiting to ambush them. The suspect, whoever or whatever it is, could be on top of these bookcases. Marcus kept his eye skyward, scanning the tops of these bookcases as they went. They'd need to get someone on the stairs to look across the tops of the shelves. They weren't going to be climbing these after all. They cleared each aisle one by one, boots lightly thudding against the stone as they cleared the site. His flashlight caught a glint of something liquidy on the ground, shining on it fully to see that it was a trail of torn-up parchment. The ripped-up paper on the floor here was practically confetti, covered in that nasty yellow pepperoni grease, leading deeper into the archives. He indicated the parchment, then the squad pushed in that direction, keeping their eyes peeled as they went. What they found was a jagged hole in the stone floor, roughly 6 feet in diameter, coated in that nasty yellow grease. Jared signaled Aaron and Jesse with a quick hand motion, 2 fingers pointed at his eyes before jabbing them toward the jagged opening. They nodded in unison, dropping to stable firing positions 10 feet back from the hole, weapons trained on the pit. Aaron's rifle light cut a harsh beam through the yellow slicked edges, while Jesse kept his muzzle tracking in a slow figure-8 pattern, ready to fire. Satisfied with their coverage, Jared tapped Marcus and the others to continue clearing the archives, their boots leaving tacky prints in the pepperoni-scented residue as they went. The stuff was everywhere now, sucking at their boots like spilled soda. It pissed him off to no end. He hated that feeling. He ignored the budding irritation in his chest. Inop was not the time to complain about a pet peeve. They cleared the rest of the chamber without issue, it being completely empty of threats. Technically, they weren't supposed to be down here, but this wasn't something he could keep from Lela. Something had busted in here, likely some kind of creature or multiple creatures, and started eating the papers in here. But why do this? What was the purpose? He and the rest of the team regrouped with Jesse and Aaron, who were still keeping their rifles trained firmly on the hole. Eddie knelt with his shield in front of him, pistol aimed at the jagged opening. NVGs. His voice was steady despite the tension in his shoulders. We clearing that too? Jared chewed his lower lip, weighing options. We should go tell Lela first before we make any decision here. I'll go handle it. He gestured toward the hole with his chin. You keep an eye on that. If anything comes out, try to apprehend it if you can. If it's a bunch and they rush you, don't take any risks, full lethal. I have a feeling it's a lot, Marcus added. Deldy's telling me that much. I mean the memories, he corrected quickly. But I mean, look at all this damage. If it were one big thing, then things would be a bit more screwed up in here. Jesse nodded. I see something yellow, not this crap, he said, indicating the goop on the floor. Something hard and scary looking. It's fuzzy. Bugs? Chris's eyes narrowed at the pit. I think whatever it is, it's bugs. Jared and the rest of the squad grunted in affirmation. That sounded right to Jared. If they're just bugs, don't hesitate to shoot them. Jared ordered, only apprehend if it's something that can be reasoned with. Eddie's nod was curt, professional. The other operators silently adjusted their stances, weapons trained on the opening. Jared moved back to the door, cracking it open just enough to whisper through the gap. Lela. The woman's gaze flicked back, then returned to the golems. Her shoulders relaxed as she exhaled. I suppose if it was truly breaking the rules, she murmured, then these would have tried seizing you when you went to deal with that gargoyle the other day. She turned her head toward him. What is it? You weren't imagining things, Jared replied. Lela pivoted fully, eyes widening. Oh my goodness, what was it? Her voice trembled slightly. Not sure. Jared kept his tone even, matter of fact. We don't know what caused it, but there's a big-ass hole in the middle of your archives now. Whole bunch of your ledgers and other books are all shredded or half-eaten. And there's this sticky yellow crap everywhere. He leaned forward. Do you know what could have done that? Lela's mouth opened and closed wordlessly before she shook her head. No, she whispered. May I see it? Jared shook his head. No, we don't know if it's safe in there. You need to stay out for now. Do you have anyone you can contact? Any guild officials or other authorities you can to report this to? She shook her head. Not right now, she answered. Most everyone is asleep at this hour. I could fetch my coat and go ask my peers what to do. She paused. Though in truth, when it's the night time, I am the one in charge of guild matters. I don't have much power, of course, but as this is part of a quest you have taken, I ask if you would be so kind to investigate what could be in that hole. Jared blinked. Why don't you have those gargoyles outside do it? They look like they can fit through there, he said. In fact, why don't you have any golems in the archives to begin with? It doesn't make any sense, he pointed out. Lela shrugged. Golems are complicated, she said. There aren't many like them in Violend. They're ancient, following the rules of their master, who made them eons ago. Once constructed and placed in a spot, once the golems enforce the rules of their master, they return to that spot. You cannot tell them to go anywhere, as they do not hear us. They merely observe us. Which is why there aren't any in the archives, she confirmed. A single golem is worth as much as a castle. Creating them is difficult. Placing them means choosing a spot for it to guard for all eternity. The archives, while important, weren't deemed special enough to warrant golem protection. Not until now, anyhow. Jared then looked to the golems in front of the counter before saying in Fayesh, "Hey, someone broke into the guild." He was sure that what Lela said was true, but it wouldn't hurt to test things out. He'd rather not have to go investigate that pit himself and put his guys in danger. So if he could get the golems to get in there somehow, then he would. Unfortunately, the things didn't reply to him at all, standing still as statues. "Damn," he said. "You weren't kidding. They only enforce where they can see. They can't hear anything." "Can they even see?" Jared asked. "They don't have eyes. Actually, wouldn't Marajin and his boys be safe if they started talking about us? The golems wouldn't be able to hear them break those rules. The oath of secrecy they take involves the golems directly. It's a long, expensive process, taking several dozen lumina shards to accomplish, but when that's done, the golems can see and hear through their eyes at all times. We assigned them to the gargoyles. If they break their oath, they will be hunted down and mauled to death." She said with a shudder, "Marajin tried everything he could to get out of the oath, but worry not, he could not squirm his way out of it. He was curious as to how this binding oath stuff worked, but he needed to get back to his team." "Well, that's good," he nodded. "But I'm going to head back in with my boys. Please go contact your authorities and let them know what's going on here. We'll guard the pit until then." Lela nodded. "I'll go fetch the guards," she said. "But if you get the inclination to go and check it out, I will not stop you," she told him. He simply nodded before turning on his heel to face the open doorway. When a gunshot rang out like thunder, Jared didn't hesitate, ignoring Lela's scream of terror as he ran through the doorway, rifle at the ready. More gunshots followed, and as soon as he got back to where he left the squad, he saw why. It was the most horrible thing he had ever seen in his entire life. Tiny humanoids erupted from the pit, no taller than a child but with nightmare proportions. Chitinous black-yellow striped exoskeletons gleaming wetly in the team's flashlights. Each freak had 4 arms, each ending in sharp clawed fingers, and their bulbous compound eyes stared out from twitching wasp heads with mandibles that clicked and dripped with the same yellow grease staining the floor. The men did not hesitate. Gunfire erupted in a deafening cascade, muzzle flashes strobing the darkness as rounds punched through chitinous bodies with splintering cracks. Mandibles clicked as their bodies slid across the greasy floor, sliding along and tripping their fellows. Spent brass rained onto stone as thick putrid grey ichor painted the archive, the stench of burnt gunpowder mixing with the reek of insectoid viscera. First it was 10, then it was 20. A final 10 pouring out before, finally, the flow slowed to a trickle. The floor had become a grotesque tapestry of twitching limbs and shattered exoskeletons. Yellow-black carapaces split open to reveal glistening grey innards that steamed in the cool air. Mandibles clicked weakly as the dying creatures drowned in pools of their own viscous fluids. The nauseating, sickly sweet stench that rose from them made Jared curl up his nose. Deldy's memories flashed through Jared's mind like grainy combat footage. Yellow-black swarms stripping entire libraries bare, their mandibles shredding ancient scrolls and frustrating him, frustrating Deldy to the point of genocide. He remembered the crucial detail that made these horrors worse. They didn't just mindlessly consume paper, they were somewhat sapient. They were smart enough to want to dig their way through into the guild archives after all. These creatures, known as the Chudo, were about as smart as goblins. Normally, in the wilderness, they stripped bark from living trees with their razor mandibles, chewing the fibrous pulp into a paste that hardened into the distinctive honeycomb chambers of their underground nests. Intricate labyrinths that could span hundreds of feet beneath the forest floor. But they were known to have a soft spot for paper, finding it easier to chew and spit for their nests, which they usually built underground. Libraries and other such establishments despised them. These little wasp freaks had been tunneling under the guild for God knows how long, meaning that they had known the layout of the guild and where to find the archives. Such creatures were never allowed into cities like this. So one of these wasps knowing exactly where to dig into for the archives was preposterous. Not unless someone had told them. They weren't beings that couldn't be negotiated with. If they could find one alive, they might be able to question it and find out who told them where the archives were. His eyes widened. "Crossfire!" Jared yelled at Jesse as he stepped a bit too close to Marcus's line of sight. The man corrected immediately, stepping back into place. "More of them are going to be coming, Jared," Aaron said, "and they're going to be coming soon. We have to find a way to block off that hole. We don't got enough rounds for all of them. There could be 100 more deeper in the tunnel." Eddie nodded. "That's what the memories are telling me." "Guys," Marcus began, "let's use the CS gas and flood the tunnel. Whatever these things are, I remember that they have sensitive eyes and smell." "Good idea, but we still need to block up the hole," Jared said. "We'll keep eyes on it. Eddie and Aaron, go find something to plug that hole, quick," he ordered. "Everyone masks." He added. They all donned the masks quickly before Eddie and Aaron immediately withdrew, talking to each other as they disappeared into the archives, looking for something to plug the hole. Another wasp had popped up, but then immediately shrank down again. This one seemed to be a bit smarter. They did need to get at least one alive to question it. Maybe they could catch that one. "Chris, less lethal," he ordered. Chris then nodded, letting his SMG hang slack on its sling before pulling up the long beanbag shotgun, aiming it straight at the hole. "We gotta take at least one alive," Jared explained. "They can be talked to, and we need to figure out how they knew where to dig." Chris nodded. "Copy that. I'll switch back to lethal if another horde comes through." "Here's what we're gonna do," Jared began, moving to a whisper. "Once the guys come back with whatever they're gonna use to block up that hole, we'll throw in the CS gas first. That'll flush out that little dude that's in there now, or it'll force him down deeper. I don't want us getting within line of sight of the hole itself. If we can capture one of these, great. If not, we'll leave it to the guards to deal with when they get here." The men agreed, nodding while keeping their guns trained on the entrance. Eventually, Eddie and Aaron returned, holding a wide, upturned circular table. It was perfect, big enough to sit flush against the hole to keep the gas in the tunnel. The only problem was they would need to get close to the tunnel in order to place it. But that's why they would throw the CS gas first. Jared indicated Marcus, who nodded before pulling out his own gas canister. He inched forward, bit by bit, pulling the pin before throwing the CS gas right down the hole. There was a loud pop, and then the sound of something sizzling for a second before a raucous coughing could be heard emanating from the tunnel. One Chudo scrambled up over the edge, hacking and spitting, chitinous fingers grabbing at its compound eyes as its mandibles clicked rapidly. Chris unloaded the beanbag, the shot hitting it square in the leg. The exoskeleton cracked as it made impact, and the thing let out a howl of agony as Eddie and Aaron rushed over to seal up the hole, CS gas already starting to rise up out of it. At the same time, Chris and Jared pounced on the wasp, wrenching its multiple arms behind its back before cuffing them securely, dragging it quickly away from the hole as it snapped at him with mandibles. Though its efforts were fruitless, Jared wondered if Deldy's memories could have been incorrect, because that thing did not seem capable of speech. It didn't have the parts for it. How do you make human speech with a mandible mouth? It didn't make any sense, yet the memories insisted that there was a way to communicate with them. But how? The circular table landed with a hollow thud against the tunnel entrance. Eddie planted his boot on its edge, leaning his body weight into it to keep the furniture in place. Eddie had the right idea. They needed to make sure that the wasps couldn't push the table out of the way. Doing so wouldn't just let more of them in here, it would let the CS gas in, which, while it wouldn't affect them due to their gas masks, would affect the guards when they came to investigate. Work such as that was harder when your eyes were watering and snot was running down your nose. They needed to find something to barricade it, to make sure it stayed pinned. "Eddie, keep your foot on that table," Jared ordered. "Boys, let's start stacking furniture on top of that thing, quick." The men all immediately began gathering other pieces of furniture across the archives, arranging them on top of the table while Eddie kept a firm foot on it, leaning his entire weight onto it. They heard scratching coming from the inside of the hole now, the table beginning to bulge or budge with every scratch. It seemed the bugs were trying to get out of the tunnel. Either they needed to get out through this way, which was barricaded, or they had to go back to where they came from, wherever that may be. If they could keep the entrance sealed long enough, they would be forced to go back, unable to deal with the CS gas. He was almost tempted to order another one thrown in there, but he didn't want to uncork the hole now, nor did he want to use another CS gas canister yet. They weren't going to get any more of these while they were here in Valand. He already lamented the amount of ammo they had used blasting those wasps into chunks of meat. He estimated that they had all just spent a fourth of their total ammunition gunning them down. Highly inefficient. "All right, Eddie, step off and get back," Jared ordered, the man removing his foot from the pile of furniture and the table. The captured wasp creature kept snapping its mandibles. In anger or pain, he couldn't really tell. The pounding against the barricade had slowed, eventually coming to a complete stop. The bugs within, no doubt, had decided to flee the other way. It wasn't sure if they would come back or not, but it seemed that they had successfully completed their first quest, protecting the guild's archives from being eaten, of all things, by a bunch of disgusting little wasp men. And this wasn't where he thought his career would lead him to. Chapter 13, Cleanly Done. The Chudo they had arrested had not been cooperative in the slightest. Jared had tried to communicate with it, but it stubbornly kept its mouth, which happened to be just above the mandibles, shut, seeming to glare at them with its giant compound bug eyes. No other wasps attempted to break through the barricade covering the hole in the archives, thank God. But he had really been hoping to get something out of this wasp they captured, to get some intel to offer to the local authorities. They had tried some of the different methods that Deldy himself had used, pulling together their memories to try and get it to talk. But while these methods would have worked in other circumstances, this particular Chudo did not want to speak with them at all. They'd tried offering it paper, threats to the larvae, lying and saying they would release it if the thing would just talk. This happened back home with normal suspects as well, refusing to cooperate no matter what you did. It was the same principle, even here, even with a creature such as this. Still, though, they had done it. They had completed their first impromptu quest. There was a small sense of fulfillment in that, something he hadn't felt during an op in quite a long time. Back when he'd first started his career, he could remember a time when finishing an op cleanly filled him with a sense of pride. But in the years after that, it just became dull routine, though that was only for the jobs that weren't mentally crushing. He'd been on ops he'd never feel pride for, no matter how clean the op went. Finding women that had been locked in basements for years, men forced into slave labor for cartels, and then the children. By God, the children. There were things he had seen that he wished he could forget. That never happened, that could never happen. But these weren't things that could not ever be erased, unfortunately. He'd almost broken ROE several dozen times over his career, nearly turned his gun upon the perpetrators who'd caused the horrors he'd seen to begin with. The only thing keeping him back was his sense of duty, along with the knowledge that these people would suffer way worse in prison. A quick death was a mercy, and he didn't want to be merciful to these people. It took quite some time before Lela returned, leading a retinue of plate-armored men into the archives. There had to be about 20 of them in all, led by a short yet broad human with a long dark beard that spilled across his plated chest. Jared had told the guys not to talk until out of earshot, not unless they were directly spoken to by the local guards as to avoid suspicion. Jared's speech was on native level now for sure, but his squad needed a little bit more time to clean up, according to Gagan. They probably would be fine talking, to be honest, but no reason to take a risk. The guards of Shriet's End looked at the barricade with shock and with revulsion for the pepperoni-greasy saliva stuff covering everything. The lead guard sneered at the Chudo corpses before looking to Jared. The guard's eyes narrowed. "Is this your adventuring party?" he asked, his gauntleted hand gesturing toward the men behind Jared. Jared nodded. "Yes, sir. We're new adventurers," he answered. The guard's head jerked back slightly, eyebrows lifting. "Sir," he echoed, voice tinged with genuine surprise. "Most adventurers don't so much as look our way unless it's something involving a quest or they've come into trouble with the law. Usually your kind think you are above us, at least until they cross the law, then they change their tune." His weathered face softened, the corner of his mouth curling upward. It's refreshing to see your kind take such a respectful tone with us. Well, Jared began, I suppose you could say I have experience, but enough about that. The Tudo have been put down and they've run back through those tunnels. I don't know how far it goes or how long it took them to dig the tunnel in the first place. But we did capture a one right over there, but it is uncooperative. If you know a better way to interrogate it, then maybe you can get something useful from it. We already tried, but it won't talk to us. The guard stroked his long beard. I don't have much experience with these creatures at all, he said. I've heard about them, but as you know, such beasts aren't allowed within city limits. Hell, they're not even near Shriet's End, or so I thought. Usually adventurers are sent out to exterminate the nests before they can become a problem, so I don't know where these ones came from. Jared glanced at the Tudo before looking back to the guard. Well, if you don't know of any active nests just outside the city, then maybe there is one being cultivated underground somewhere in here. Like maybe in your sewer system or something. That could be, the guard replied, eyes shifting to the bound Tudo. There will be a thorough investigation, and we'll have guards posted here to ensure that the archives are not damaged again. You did good work here. You're going to have a fine career in adventuring. Curious, he said after a moment. How did you get here so quickly, or were you let in? Jared blinked. Apparently Lela hadn't told the guards why they were in there yet. He had to think fast. We do a lot of our adventuring at night, Jared answered. We came in to accept new quests, and Lela asked us to investigate a scary noise she heard in the back. So technically, first quest, though we didn't think that there would actually be anything like this in here, he admitted. You say that you do your adventuring at night, the guard asked, narrowing his eyes. But you said this was your first quest. A lot of our work was under the table before, Jared lied quickly. This was our first official quest. The guard simply nodded. Ah, yes, that makes sense. There's a lot of people that don't register with the guild and just work under the table, so to speak. It's technically illegal, but it's, well, suffice to say, no one really cares. I know I don't, and you did good work here. I do not intend to prosecute you for that. If you and your men are ready, you can go and report to that receptionist now and get yourselves your reward. Have a good day. My name is Gautar, by the way. Pleasure to make your acquaintance. Jared, he replied, grasping the man's hand firmly before giving a single solid shake. It's nice to meet you. Gautar smiled. Likewise, Jared. Keep your eyes out for any notices on the job board. There might be something that comes up soon in relation to this little incident. If your hunch is correct, then we might post a job to the board involving trekking into the sewers and finding this nest. It will likely be posted by the guard themselves, but the nobility may also post a quest. Though the gargoyles don't really involve themselves in matters such as this, I have a feeling that knowing that a Tudo nest could be inside the city might make them reconsider. They wouldn't want their precious books and scrolls to get eaten, I assume. Works for me. Jared nodded before looking to his men. All right, boys, we're relieved. His squad then stacked up behind Jared, the men falling into low ready before marching with him towards the exit, passing the dozens of guards as they went. The Fëanorans stared in open awe at their guns as they moved toward the exit, some speculating amongst themselves that they must be dwarf-made thunderstaves. Strangely, this didn't feel all too different from getting relieved by other standard officers. He felt a bit nervous, leaving these men to guard the whole, though, due to the fact that they were armed with only swords, crossbows, and halberds. Though the creatures themselves, besides their wasp-like appearance, hadn't appeared all too dangerous. They were child-sized after all. They couldn't have been more than 30 pounds each. They could have probably stomped them all to death, honestly, saved the ammo. But if those mandibles could chew through wood so easily, and potentially stone, then maybe it had been a better idea to keep them at a distance. It could be like little waspy piranhas for all he knew. They then passed back into the guild lobby, seeing Lela standing there, peering into the chamber. Her eyes locked with Jared's as he pushed up his ballistic goggles. Lela's eyes widened. Are you okay? Jared nodded. Yeah, we're okay. Just we weren't expecting to see a bunch of little wasp men in there. Wasn't exactly on my bingo card. Lela's head tilted slightly, brow furrowing. Bingo card? Never mind, Jared waved it off. All right, so the quest is complete. I know it was technically under the table, So do we want to keep it off the record? Lela straightened her posture, shoulders squaring. No, this is going on the record. If you fought of wasp men, then you can only be talking about a Chudo nest. You have no clue how much damage you prevented. This will be a part of your guild statistics and will be a huge jump for you in regards to receiving a higher rank from bronze, which is your current standing. You'll be duly rewarded. Lela's fingers drummed against the counter. Though I have nothing I can hand you right now, as I haven't done the proper paperwork for it yet. If you come back just before I leave in the morning, I'll probably have it ready for you, along with your bronze tags indicating your status. Jared's eyebrows rose. Sounds good to me. Surprised we haven't gotten our tags yet, if I'm honest. There was a small shortage of bronze. Lela exhaled heavily, shoulders slumping. But we recently got our order for new tags filled. All that needs done is for me to carve your names into the metal, then you'll be set. All right, sounds good. Jared pivoted toward his men. Boys, you ready to get some shut-eye? Eddie rubbed at his eyes beneath his goggles. I know I am. Freaking hate bugs, man. Aaron peeled his balaclava upward, revealing a cocky grin as he leaned against the counter. Hey, Lela, don't worry about those wasps. I took care of business in there. Trust me, baby, all good. Lela's eyes narrowed to slits. What did you just call me? Aaron's smile faltered, his weight shifting backward. It's kind of like a term of endearment. Calling someone baby. Eddie yanked his own balaclava up, revealing a broad smirk as he clapped Aaron's shoulder hard enough to make him stumble. That's right, baby. Aaron grumbled before he began walking away from the counter towards the staircase, clearly defeated. Poor guy. Lela did not seem interested in him at all, not in that way. But it was for the best. They couldn't be forming relationships like that. They needed to get home, and setting down stakes here in Valend would just make getting home even harder. Jared jerked his thumb toward the staircase. We're going to turn in for the night, all right, Lela? Don't hesitate to come back up if you need our help, though, okay? She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, her smile tired but genuine. Sounds good to me. Thank you for your help. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a mountain of paperwork I will need to get through to get this all sorted by morning. Her shoulders slumped as she flexed her fingers. Oh, by the overseer, my poor wrists. Jared winced sympathetically. He could understand the pain of paperwork. He motioned for his team to follow as Aaron trudged ahead, shoulders hunched. Aaron glanced back, his voice pitched dramatically high. Man, she ain't never gonna love me, huh? I'm just too handsome. It's a tragedy. Eddie's laugh rumbled from deep in his chest. You're the ugliest dude on the squad. Man, what are you talking about? Aaron spun around, walking backward. Is that coming from the fattest dude in the squad? Eddie's jaw tightened. If by obese you mean a beast, then yes. Also, I'll have you know ladies like my rugged looks. They don't like pretty boys like you. Pretty boy? Aaron's voice cracked. Marcus cleared his throat. Well, you did have that nasty ponytail at one time. It added to my charm, Aaron muttered as they reached the bottom of the stairs. Ladies loved it. Jared rolled his eyes. It made you look like a girl. Jer, you're just mad that you're too ugly and fat to pull one off. Aaron jabbed a finger in his direction before turning to Marcus. And Marcus, I curse you to receive a receding hairline in your near future. He bounded up the first few steps, taking them two at a time. Eddie's grin spread across his face. Oh, the princess is getting crabby. Aaron didn't miss a beat, shooting back over his shoulder. Oh, the fat ass is getting hungry, he said, pitching his voice higher. Jared smiled. They'd never had banter like this after an op before. They'd taken lives, but at the same time they weren't exactly guilty killings, more like pest control. There had been something satisfying about it. Whereas before, in Los Muertes, there had only been pressure, stress. Not to say that this little quest was stress-free, of course. They all walked up the stairs together, a sort of levity in the air. Even Eddie and Jesse didn't argue as they all padded up to their chambers and continued speaking to one another, before eventually departing to get ready for bed. Jared lay back on his mattress, a smile on his face as he drifted off to sleep. Chapter 14. Nativity Test. Today was the day of the nativity test, finally. It feels like it had been forever since they first stepped foot into the guild, but the truth was that it had only been about a week. Gagan said that they were well and truly ready now, that they should pass as natives to most people. They only needed to finish this last test, the most important one, to convincingly pass as native Fenorans. The combination of Deldi's memories and Gagan's lessons should make that easy. On top of that, they all didn't have any English accent anymore when speaking Faesh, and they understood enough basic history, along with some niche topics, that could convincingly pass them off as being native. Gagan stood in front of his lectern, hands gripping the sides of it, as he leaned forward, eyes shifting to each squad member in turn. "Today is the big day," he announced. "We have quite a few people picked out to run you through today, just to make sure there aren't any holes in your logic." His voice dropped to a conspiratorial tone. "But I think you're going to pass with flying colors. Now the first person coming in to talk to you is an elf woman. She works as a scribe in our Krillvane branch." Gagan's eyes narrowed. "Of course, she, along with the other testers, have no idea that you are Outworlders, and you need to keep it that way." Stroking his beard once, he added, "I have informed her and the others to try and spot anything strange about you, so they will be on the lookout for something off. This is to help mimic what an Outworlder hunter would be on the lookout for. Just to warn you, the last person to test you will have something different about them. Now, do you have any questions?" Jared raised a hand. After Gagan's nod, he lowered it and leaned forward. "If any of them discover our origins, do we need to take more tests?" Gagan stroked his beard. "Yes. Any failure will extend your stay so we can continue to smooth out those rough edges. Fear not, though. I have every confidence that you'll succeed." Eddie's hand shot up. "Yes?" Gagan turned his attention to him. "How many examiners should we expect?" Eddie asked. "3, Gagan replied, ticking them off on thick fingers. "First will be our elven scribe. Her centuries of experience will help her spot any knowledge gaps. Remember, these individuals arrive prepared to challenge you. They'll probe with questions, and your answers must be flawless." Marcus's hand shot up next. "Who are the other 2 testers?" Gagan replied, "A fellow dwarf from Embera, such as myself, who works around Lumina shards quite often and will test your knowledge on that, among other things. Some of which might be a bit more niche and surprising. He can catch you off guard, that one." Gagan sighed. "And as for the last," he grinned, "we have a normal citizen of Valand, chosen at random from the people of Shriet's End. A wild card. They were told not much, just to test you on your knowledge as the others will do. I know I said that it would only be guild employees, but I felt that putting you up against a commoner would be good for enrichment. They were also told to look out for anything strange. Now then," he clapped his wide hands together, "are you ready to begin?" Jared looked back to his squad, seeing them arranged in different desks that were in rows. They all looked to him and nodded. Jared then turned his gaze back to Gagan, locking eyes with the dwarf. "We're ready," Jared said. Gagan nodded, pleased. "All right, then we will begin. I will send in our first tester. Her name is Vyra. Good luck, boys. They will be coming in one after another as you finish their tests, after which they will come out and tell me what is wrong with you all." With that, Gagan turned on his heel and marched out, his heavy boots thudding against the stone floor, the classroom door swinging shut behind him with a definitive click. A moment of tense silence followed before the latch lifted again, before the door swung inward, revealing Vera, who glided into the room with the effortless grace. She was tall for a woman, being only a few fingers shorter than Jared himself. Her long red hair hung in curls down to her back, which contrasted with the thick green robes she wore. She stepped up to the lectern before looking at all of them, narrowing green eyes, likely trying to pick out what could be off about them. Her freckled nose turned up as she sniffed the air, then stared at them again. "You don't look or smell too different," she said, pursing her lips. "But there is something off," she continued seemingly to herself. "You too," she said, pointing to Marcus and Jesse. "You're different from the rest. Why is that?" "We're shardwalkers," Marcus answered immediately. "In my shard and his, everyone mostly looks like us. Because as you know, the longer people are settled in a shard, the more their descendants begin to change to adapt to that shard's environment." Jesse nodded. "That's right. My shard was really hot and had a lot of sunshine," he explained, indicating his deeply tanned skin. Unlike you Veylanders, my people adapted to see a lot of sunshine. And what are your people called? Vira asked Jesse, staring at him intently. He only hesitated for half a second. Hispanios. He smiled, shooting a quick glance at Jared. Hispanios? Was that the best fake name he could come up with? There was no way she'd buy that. Hispanios, she said flatly. I can't say I've ever heard of such a people. Jesse shrugged. There's billions of shards out there. You can't have seen everything in the Overseer's creation. Fair enough, she gave a respectful nod. Now I am curious. What are your people called? She asked, turning to Marcus. Japes, he replied, keeping his face straight. Jared almost wanted to put his head in his hands at hearing these fake race names. All they did was change up the lettering a bit. But perhaps that was good enough. Vira wouldn't have heard the word Hispanic or Japanese before, after all. But in that case, maybe it would have been fine to just say the actual racial name instead. I've never seen anyone like you before, she noted. Fascinating if you pass on. Would you both donate your bodies to me for dissection? Jesse and Marcus shot disgusted glances at one another before back to Vira, both saying, no, in unison and disgust. Vira nodded to herself. I'll convince you later. Shardwalkers, huh? That must have been what was different about you. I'm not sure why I was brought in to find out such a secret. It is not like being a Shardwalker is a horrible crime after all, she finished, before glancing over the rest of the squad. Now that I look at your companions, your facial structures and skin tones are similar to Veylander humans. But there are small differences that normal people wouldn't see. Different skull structures and such. You must all be Shardwalkers then. She nodded to herself. My genius is unparalleled. Would any of you donate your corpses for dissection? Of course, Earthling races wouldn't exist normally in Feanor. Jared could maybe pass as a Veylander at a glance, but the humans of this shard weren't European. They were basically their own race, only sharing a skin tone. Vira's eyes gleamed with scientific interest as she leaned forward over the lectern. I notice none of you have answered my previous inquiry, she said, tapping one long finger against the wood. Would you consider donating your bodies to my research after your inevitable demise? Purely in the interest of knowledge, of course. Jared straightened in his seat, maintaining eye contact with Vira as he cleared his throat. Ms., with all due respect, he began, his tone firm but diplomatic, fingers tensing slightly against the edge of his desk. And I think I speak for all of us here. We don't want to be dissected. Her shoulders slumped in visible disappointment. She straightened the sleeves of her green robes with a practiced motion, then leaned forward against the lectern. Very well then, we will continue with the testing. She drummed her long fingers against the wood, her gaze sharpening as she fixed her eyes directly on Jared. Please explain to me the history of Veyland. Roughly. Hyperspecifics are not required, but they will earn you more of my respect. Jared nodded, his jaw tightening as Deldy's memories flooded through his mind alongside the knowledge from Gagan's meticulous lessons. He squared his shoulders and met Vira's expectant gaze. Veyland is one of the older shards in Feanor, he said, his voice measured and confident. It's been around for tens of thousands of years, woven into the fabric eons ago by the Overseer. It's in a perpetual state of chaos, however, partly due to the nature of the arena outside Gargle city-states. Vira's eyes glittered with academic approval as she tapped her long fingernail against the lectern. Yes, very good. Now you, big man, she continued, gesturing toward Eddie with a quick flick of her wrist. Do you know why the arena has not been conquered? Why none can ever hope to conquer it? Eddie shifted his weight in the chair, his broad shoulders tensing as he considered the question. After a moment he leaned forward, resting his forearms on the desk. It's a combination of a lot of things. There's no one problem. There are armies of bandits out there constantly squabbling for territory, along with various types of monsters, their nests, and other creatures that make it unsuitable for habitation. For normal people anyway, lots of criminal gangs hide out in the arena, like the Knotted Veil. Not only that, at nighttime it gets even shittier, pardon my language, with even some forgotten beasts stomping around. Vira nodded, apparently satisfied with Eddie's answer. Her gaze swept across the room before settling on Marcus. You there? What are forgotten beasts? Marcus straightened in his chair, shoulders squaring. Forgotten beasts are twisted monsters that live beneath the ground, hundreds of miles down. Normally, the dwarves of Embera were the ones who had to deal with them the most, as their kingdom extends deep underground, but in the arena, they freely roam on the surface, though that's mostly at night. Vyra nodded with scholarly approval. Yes, this is true, she said, tapping her fingernail against the lectern. So mighty it would take an army of Gargan to overcome them. Her eyes narrowed as she scanned the room, voice dropping to a more challenging tone. Speaking of which, the Gargan, what are they? Jesse cleared his throat. The Gargan are the military arm of the Gargle nobility, ma'am, he answered. They enforce their will in their city-states. They're not like guards that patrol cities. Rather, they're specifically for engaging in war, like with other Gargals and their Gargan, or attempting to clear out new territory in the arena. Vyra smiled. Yes, that is correct. The Gargan are the dogs of the Gargals. Do not say that I said that, for as you know, the Gargals… She let the question hang, eyes going wide as she scanned the faces of everyone in the room. Chris leaned forward. The Gargals like abusing their power. 600 years ago, the original High King Gargal established their rule over central Violend, ruling over the people beneath them and calling them the flock. The flock, being their sheep, means the Gargals can do whatever they want to them. That's right, they see everybody as the flock, she nodded. But technically our kind, that being you and me and many of the citizens within Shriet's End, they don't technically classify as being part of the flock. Why is that? She asked, looking to Aaron directly. Aaron leaned back in his chair and gave her his best smile. The true flock are second-class citizens, humans that live like indentured servants on Gargal properties or on the edges of the arena to farm. They don't have any rights whatsoever and thus can't become adventurers, not unless granted their freedom by a Gargal lord themselves, which often never happens. Vyra nodded again, satisfied, her long fingers steepling beneath her pointed chin. She launched into another barrage of questions, her voice rising and falling with academic fervor as she pivoted from one squad member to the next. What of the yellow-eyed orcs' territorial markers? Describe the composition of Embera steel. Name 3 poisons extracted from arena flora. The relentless interrogation continued as sunlight crawled across the stone floor, their throats growing parched, shoulders stiffening against the hard-backed chairs. When an hour had passed, a cat-like smile spread across her face. Well, I don't see anything strange about you other than your nature as shardwalkers, so I assume that that is what old Gagan meant. Again, my genius is just unparalleled. I don't know why you wouldn't admit that, though, unless there's something else you're hiding. Jared pressed his lips into a thin line before shaking his head. Not at all, ma'am, he replied with practiced neutrality, the same tone he'd used during countless suspect interviews. We're just shardwalkers. Around him, his men rumbled their agreement, Eddie's bass particularly distinct among the chorus of affirmations. Very well, then. Good day. It was nice meeting you. If you were ever in Krillvine and need quests, I'm sure our branch will have something for you to do. Farewell, she said in a bubbly tone, walking towards the door before shutting it behind her. The door clicked shut, and 6 sets of shoulders slumped in unison. Eddie exhaled loudly, rubbing his neck. Oh my God, I thought that would never end. She was a certified yapper. Jesse massaged his temples. My head hurts. She's a teacher, Marcus countered, straightening in his chair. That's her job. No, she's a scribe, Jared corrected, stretching his arms above his head. Chris snorted, leaning back until his chair creaked. They're supposed to write things down, aren't they? I don't know how you can write when all you do is talk. Aaron jabbed a finger across the table. Hey, don't you be talking about my future wife that way, he glowered. Eddie's laugh boomed across the room as he slapped his knee. Future wife? Sure, little buddy. Maybe one day if she decides to settle on marrying a gnome. Before Aaron could retort, the door opened again, and in shuffled a squat dwarf, much like Gagan himself. Barely 4 feet tall, with shoulders nearly as wide as his height, he moved with the deliberate gait of someone accustomed to low tunnels. His hands were wide and calloused, scarred with countless tiny burns and nicks, and his white beard cascaded to his belt line in elaborate braids secured with iron clasps. His clothing stood out, white fabric as thick as canvas, studded with dull crystal lumina shards arranged in precise diamond patterns across his chest and sleeves. There was even a red crystal the size of a football nestled in his beard, secured by 3 interwoven braids that formed a cradle around it. "Good day," he greeted. "I am Falgus of Embera. I've been told there's something odd about you." He then started stroking his beard, looking at each of them in turn. "Tell me, are you Outworlders?" Jared's throat tightened as the dwarf's question hung in the air. "No, sir, we're just shardwalkers." He fought to keep his expression neutral as he met the dwarf's grey eyes. He didn't want to go through yet another week of testing. The thought of it filled him with frustration. Something wasn't adding up, though. What detail had given them away to Falgus so quickly? It didn't make sense. How could he just walk in and know? Falgus threw his head back and laughed, his beard swinging. "I know you're shardwalkers. Figured that out the moment I stepped in. I was just making a joke." He winked, stroking his elaborate braids. "An Outworlder wouldn't speak like you do. They don't even speak Fainor. I mean Faesh, whatever you want to call it." He waved a dismissive hand. "Look, language is not my forte. I am here to question you about Lumina shards, and I'm not going to take an hour to do so like some people." His eyes narrowed as he glowered at the door. "You there? What is a Lumina shard?" he asked, looking to Jared. Jared paused before replying. "A Lumina shard is a crystallized source of magic dug up from under the earth." "And why does this happen?" he asked, looking to Eddie. "It's theorized that the same magics that create tomes exist in a more chaotic state, and that every shard in Fainor is enwrapped by this same magical energy. These condense into Lumina shards that form underground where the earth and this source of magic meet," Eddie answered. Falgus nodded, his thick fingers stroking the elaborate braids of his beard. "Yes, very good. It is theorized that the Faelords, when they write those tomes, draw from this same magical source, the Overseer's power made manifest." He thumped his chest proudly. "That's what I believe, anyway. You'll hear plenty of other theories across Valand and the entirety of Fainor." The dwarf leaned forward, eyes brightening. "Lumina crystals exist in other shards too. But in Valand, they're endemic. Rare elsewhere, according to you shardwalkers, so rare that outsiders don't know the full extent their applications." His stubby fingers reached for the crimson gem nestled in his beard. "Take this red crystal. An ignition crystal. The fires of a forge exist within it." He unthreaded it from his braids with practiced movements. "I have it sitting idle now, but—" The crystal clattered onto the stone floor. Falgus grinned, revealing gold-capped teeth. "Good thing you have stone ground here." He clapped his hands once, then slapped the crystal with a meaty thwack. Heat blasted outward like an opened furnace door. Jared flinched backward. Around him, his squad stared, mouths slightly open. They'd learned about what the crystals could do, but seeing it, feeling the waves of heat pulsing from a simple stone, was something else entirely. Falgus grinned, apparently pleased with himself. "The uses varied, often depending on color, you see," he explained. "With these, you can pretty much do whatever it is you wish. Now, as for a test question instead of an explanation, is it possible to mix colors?" "Anyone?" he asked, looking at the class. Chris nodded. "Yes, you can," he confirmed. "If I were to take a blue crystal and press it to that red crystal, it would get absorbed." Falgus paused before wagging his finger. "Almost. The truth is a bit more complicated than that. If Lumina shards could just eat each other, you wouldn't be able to carry them in the same sack now, would you?" he asked rhetorically. "No, it is a very deliberate process, fusing crystals. It can be done with bare hands, sure, but it would take ages. Which is why glimmer seekers, such as myself, use specialized tools to expedite the process. I did not bring my tools, but I advise that you do not try to fuse crystals on your own. Find an experienced glimmer seeker to do so. Most of us are dwarves, and yes, while we cost dozens of crystals to hire, we can make Lumina shards that can do just about anything you want." Hearing that, the boys all looked to each other, eyes wide. The ideas ran wildly through Jared's head. Reusable flashbangs, NVGs that never ran out of battery. Hell, the limit was basically their imagination. They just needed to be more familiar with the subject. Jared felt the ghost of Deldy's knowledge stirring in his mind, fragments of crystal theory that had seeped into all their borrowed memories. If they were ever going to find a way home, mastering this subject would be crucial. After all, it was Deldy's crystal manipulation that had torn them across realities to Valand in the first place. Their future was going to involve a lot of Lumina shards and a lot of interaction with these Glimmer Seekers for sure. Falgus continued his lecture on Lumina crystals, his stubby fingers tracing diagrams in the air while his white beard bobbed with enthusiasm. Unlike Vyra's hour of history that had left them shifting in their seats with cramped muscles and dry throats, the dwarf's 10-minute crash course felt almost merciful. Practical information delivered with the efficiency of a craftsman who valued his time as preciously as his gems. The dwarf looked pleased with himself. "Okay, boys, it was nice interacting with you. You seem quite sharp for new people to our realm, being shardwalkers, of course. Do be careful about the gargoyles. They do not like shardwalkers. In fact, they don't particularly like anybody, now that I think about it." "Is it hard being under their rule?" Jared asked. Falgus just blinked. "Under their rule? Embera is independent," he laughed. "I would never serve a gargoyle." "Ha ha," he laughed as if the idea was ludicrous. "I would like to see them go and try and take over Imbara. We would blast them to bits. Don't tell them I said that, though." He winked, putting a finger to his lips. "I must be going. I have at least 20 apprentices back in Embera to instruct. If you are ever there and wish to learn more, please do give me a visit. I'll give you a small discount. 0.1%, he said, eyebrows raising as if that were a huge amount. "Farewell." The dwarf gathered his crystal with practiced efficiency, tied it into his beard, nodded once to the squad, and strode from the room, his beard swinging with each determined step. Immediately after that, giving the boys no time to banter, came a tall, gangly version of Eddie. He had to be just as tall as Eddie, but like he was made out of sticks. He wore simple clothes made out of wool, and he looked tired. His long, scraggly beard wild and unkempt, his bald head burnt by the sun. He looked at the class, seeming uncertain. "I don't really know why I was told to come in here," he shrugged. "I think I have to give you all a test or something." Why is—" he continued. "Yeah, I don't know. I was just chosen randomly. They said, 'Oh, just come in and talk to these men and tell me if you saw something weird about them.'" "Not that you guys are weird," he quickly clarified. "You're not weird at all." I don't think." Jared straightened his posture. "What's your name?" he inquired, voice steady with practiced authority. "Oh, my name is Deanbrick," the man mumbled. Behind Jared, Jesse suppressed a snicker, disguising it as a throat-clearing cough. "Well, Deanbrick," Jared pressed on with diplomatic precision, "just ask us any question about anything, and then you can go. Let's keep it to one question, huh?" He offered a disarming smile. Deanbrick scratched his beard thoughtfully. "All right, what's your favorite tavern in town?" Jared hesitated, mentally rifling through Deldy's borrowed memories. "I like the Windy Wolf personally," he declared with false confidence. "The Windy Wolf?" Deanbrick exclaimed, eyes lighting up. "That's my favorite too." "Wait." His enthusiasm dimmed. "I never see you there. I'm a regular. I'm there every night." Jared's expression faltered momentarily. Shit, he'd been too confident. He'd forgotten this was a local. Was this what Gagan had been counting on? For Deanbrick to poke holes in a story? "Well, we're also new here in town," Eddie cut in smoothly, "and you asked us our favorite. We saw the outside of the Windy Wolf and thought, oh, this looks like a pretty good place. So decided it was our favorite." Eddie nodded, shoulders relaxing. "Yeah, that's right," Chris interjected, leaning forward. Deanbrick scratched his patchy beard, brow furrowing. "The Windy Wolf is a shithole," he muttered, eyes darting between them. "It's only my favorite because of how cheap it is." "Well, you see, we prefer rustic, more clandestine areas to gather," Marcus offered quickly, his voice taking on the measured tone he used during negotiations. "To gather?" Deanbrick challenged, running a calloused hand through his thinning hair. "You just said you were never in there before." Jesse exhaled sharply, jaw tightening. "Weren't you listening, man? We said that we like the aesthetic of the place. We're going to go in there eventually based off of that." His voice rose with each word. Geez, this freaking guy. Deanbrick recoiled, palms raised defensively. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Jesse's expression softened, regret flashing across his face. No, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have snapped at you that way. Look, when we eventually do go in there, I'll buy you a drink. Sound good? Deanbrick's face brightened, revealing a smile with several gaps. Yeah, that sounds good. Well, I guess that was my one question, and I don't think there was anything weird about you, so I suppose I'll get going. Jared let out a sigh of relief as the man walked out of the room. He was certain they passed, but a nag of doubt ate at him. What if they hadn't performed well enough? What if they needed to take a dozen more tests again? The thought was unbearable. I ain't staying cooped up here forever. Eddie's fists tightened. I know we had to pass that thing, man. The other men grunted in affirmation, staring expectantly at the door while sitting in silence. A few minutes later, Gagan walked in, clapping his hands together. Congratulations, you've done it, he said happily. You've passed the test. I, of course, did not talk to the elf, as you know. My kind and theirs do not talk under any circumstances. But I had a third party handle mediation between us, and they said that Vira said that you all did well. Congratulations. You are natives. Chapter 15. Bounty. It felt almost strange gathering up all their stuff, but they had passed the nativity test, and their time at the guild would be coming to an end. There was nothing more that needed to be done. Gagan had already left, having returned to Krillvane just an hour after they had passed their test. The dwarf mentioned that he would enjoy seeing them all again if they ever popped by the capital for a visit. Jared agreed that if they were in the neighborhood, they would take him up on that offer. He sat on the edge of his bed now, clad in his full tactical gear, wondering about where they should go next. They could try to head to Krillvane immediately. There were more resources there, along with access to more scholars that knew about Lumina shards, potentially meaning that there could be a person there that could understand crystal tuning. A trip to Embera, the dwarven capital, was tantalizing for the same reasons, but the idea of finding a way to replicate their ammo tempted him more in that direction. He decided that it might be in their best interest for them all to remain in Shriet's End though, at least for now. Earn higher ranks, get some money, then head to Krillvine. The stash they'd stolen from Deldy's dungeon would be enough to set them up in Krillvane for months, true, but status was everything over there. If they marched up to Krillvane being bronze-ranked adventurers, they would only be above the flock in terms of rights. They needed to get up to at least where Burlo was, the silver rank, so that people wouldn't think they could trample all over his team. Truth was, he wouldn't let anyone trample over his team, not here or there. But if they were Krillvane, and they didn't let those above them treat them like trash, that could cause problems. His boys wouldn't stand for it either, he was sure. He could see Eddie or Jesse, any of them really, except for maybe Marcus, snapping at a gargle who spoke to them the wrong way. If they were silver-ranked adventurers, though, they'd have more of their own weight to throw around, and thus couldn't be bullied without the Gargals risking a duel with them. They had gotten lucky with Frisha. Normally, Gargals could just execute a bronze-ranked adventurer for crossing them, as their rank was of the peasantry. Silver ranks commanded respect, and were almost viewed as nobles by the populace, so technically, Burlo Armbig, that giant orc, had more social status than Frisha did. Among the Gargals, he was the lowest ranked. Even if he was a son of the High King, the sovereign of this nation, he was only the 20th son. And an outcast on top of that, despised by his siblings and even their servants. Frisha was a small fry, which is why he was stuck here in Shriet's End, taking his frustrations out on the citizens. That guy was going to be a problem. There had to be some way to deal with him that didn't involve outright murder. He shook his head. He was getting off track. It should be nighttime about now. Lela would be down in the lobby, and the boys would be all suited up and ready to go too. They were probably waiting for him just outside. He stood with a groan, popping his back before double-checking that he had all of his gear. Once he was certain that he had everything, Jared hefted his tactical vest, feeling the familiar weight of his gear settle against his chest. He paused at the threshold, casting one last glance at the four-poster bed with its down mattress and embroidered quilt. Luxuries he'd never expected to find in this medieval world. The polished wooden nightstand still held the crystal lamp that had illuminated so many of his late-night planning sessions. With a quiet sigh, he gripped the brass handle and slid the heavy oak door shut behind him, the soft click of the latch marking the end of his vacation. They had considered waiting until tomorrow morning to leave, but he and the guys were both antsy and ready to get out of here. Speaking of which, "Mornin', Princess?" he heard Eddie say. Jared turned around to see the big man, along with the rest of the squad, hanging out near the window overlooking the plaza. The very same window he'd been lowered out of to go rescue that girl from Frischer. Jared smiled. "You guys ready to get this thing going?" he asked. Jesse smirked and nodded. "Yeah, man, I want to get out of here. Maragin ain't gonna pepperball himself." "Hopefully we never see him again," Jared sighed. "I doubt it, though." Well, Aaron shrugged. "No point worrying about it now. Come on, let's go see my future wife." The guys all groaned and shook their heads at Aaron's words, but began moving through the halls toward the staircase, feeling lighter on their feet. Or at least Jared did. He was sure the squad felt the same way he did, a bit relieved to get out of the nest, so to speak. As they reached the bottom of the stairs and passed into the lobby, he saw Lella hunched over the far counter, dark circles shadowing her eyes as she rubbed her temples with ink-stained fingers, pausing only to stifle a yawn behind her palm. She perked up at seeing them, though, and excitedly waved them over. A pair of adventurers slumped at the corner tables had long since surrendered to exhaustion, their soft snores punctuating the quiet of the lobby. It seemed like if they couldn't get a place to stay for the night, they could just come in here and bum off of the tables. That wasn't Jared's business. He wasn't going to stop them. There were even a few guards posted near the door leading to the archives, with Lella herself positioned far down the counter, away from the entrance. For the best, really, wouldn't want a pack of Chudo running through and tearing her to pieces. He wondered how many guards were watching that hole. Was it still only covered by furniture, or had they found an alternative method of sealing it? "Good evening," Lella said excitedly as they reached her. "Are you ready to start heading out? Remember, as soon as you step foot over that threshold, you can't go back to the second floor. That will be closed off to you as you are now natives, and as such will be treated as such," she continued, whispering. "So ensure you have everything before you leave." Jared gave a firm nod. "Gear's all accounted for," he confirmed, patting his tactical vest. "We quadruple-checked everything, didn't we?" He glanced back at his team. Eddie's massive frame shifted as he adjusted his shield harness. "Clean sweep, boss. Rooms like we were never there." Lella's shoulders visibly relaxed. That's excellent." Her fingers fidgeted with a loose thread on her sleeve. "I should mention, your presence here has been reassuring," she admitted, her gaze shifting down for an instant before finding his eyes again. "Don't be a stranger if you decide to stay in Shreet's End." He furrowed his brow a moment. Surely Lella didn't. "Nah, no way." "No, don't worry. We're going to be in town for a while," Jared told her. "We'll come visit you. And honestly, we decided we don't want to deal with too many other adventurers during the daytime, so most of our quests will be accepted at night if you don't mind the extra work." Lella brightened immediately. "Why, not at all," she said. "In fact, while you're all here, would you like to look at the quest board? All you have to do is go over to the board itself, find a quest on a piece of parchment, grab it and bring it to me, and I will approve or disapprove it, depending on your rank. Though, in truth, all you need to do is read the finer details to find out if you're eligible to accept it. There should be a minimum rank requirement written on it somewhere." Jared looked to his men, who shrugged, uncertain. Then he looked back to Lella. "I don't see why not. Boys, let's head over to that job board. We'll be right back," he told Lella, before pivoting and moving across the room toward the quest board mounted on the far wall. His squad followed him closely until they reached the board. It dominated the wall, easily 8 feet wide by 6 feet tall, smooth at the edges from years of hands reaching for postings. Dozens of yellowed parchments in various states of curl and tear competed for space, secured by thick, round-capped steel pins that glinted in the orange lumina light. Some notices were fresh with crisp edges and vibrant ink. Others had faded to near illegibility, their corners dog-eared and stained with what might have been ale. Jared's eyes scanned the crowded board, taking in the rainbow of quest parchments. Silver-bordered notices promised substantial rewards for clearing out something called the Sunken Spire, but required silver rank. The embossed metallic border, practically gleaming with importance, juxtaposed next to that, was a faded yellow notice with childish handwriting that offered 3 crystal shards for locating a spotted dog that had run off from its home. Between these extremes lay dozens of bronze-appropriate tasks: escort missions to neighboring hamlets, requests to recover stolen goods, and bounties on local troublemakers. Each quest bore the telltale stamp of the guild in the corner, a crossed sword and quill that legitimized even the most mundane request. Apparently in Valand, anyone with the posting fee could turn their problem into an adventurer's payday. Dog-finding wasn't exactly what his team was suited for, and these silver-ranked quests seemed a bit too dangerous, not that they even could accept them. Another one caught his eye, though. He pulled it from the board, his men gathering around it to read it closely. It was a drawing of a man with a mean mug, a deep scar across his brow and bald head. Above his head, written in Faesh, "Wanted." Below the portrait was the description of the job. Minimum requirement, a team of bronze ranks. Name unknown, wanted dead or alive for the murder of Doggy Willett, the merchant. Suspected to be hiding out in either the arena or the slums of Shriet's End. 10 Lumina crystals if dead and brought into the guild. 20 Lumina crystals if brought to the guild alive. The men all then looked to each other. "I don't know, boys. I think this one seems up our alley," Jared said. "Do you want to go for this one? We do got to build up our rank. Bringing in a murderer is a good way to get some headway on that." Eddie nodded. "Yeah, I think we should. I don't see any details about any potential hazards, though. Like what if he's in a gang or something?" "Whoever posted it probably doesn't have a clue," Marcus observed, shifting his weight. "We'll be going into unknown territory, but this is a bad dude, I'm sure. Bad dudes tend to stick together." "Not necessarily," Chris countered, tapping the parchment with his index finger. "Bad dudes also hate each other. He could be totally alone for all we know." "Yeah, but we don't know," Aaron muttered, arms folded across his chest. "That's the problem here, man. The less we know, the more dangerous it is. And 20 Lumina crystals for something like this. It's kind of paltry, honestly. We got, 500 from Deldy's dungeon." "That was a unique circumstance, though," Jared reminded him, glancing at the other postings. "Look at the other quest rewards that are posted, and think about just how valuable these crystals are. This seems like it's pretty fair to me anyway." "Who posted the quest?" Jesse asked. Jared flipped the parchment over, the backside revealing cramped handwriting in faded brown ink that had bled through in spots. "Posted by the Willett family of Copper Street," it began, followed by a formal seal, 3 interlocking circles pressed into red wax. Below that, a paragraph detailed how the captured criminal would be remanded to guild custody for processing before transfer to the Shriet's End Guard for judgment and proper execution as befits the crime of murder. A final paragraph, written in a different, more hurried hand, pleaded that all righteous citizens of our fair city should demand the ultimate penalty for this heinous act against an honest merchant and beloved father of 4. Someone had underlined ultimate penalty 3 times, the quill having torn the parchment slightly on the final stroke. "They're going to kill him as soon as we bring him in," Aaron whistled. "Damn, that's harsh." "No, it doesn't say that." Jared shook his head. He pointed a finger to the parchment. "Look right there. They definitely want him to be executed, but the guild is going to be turning him over to the guards, not the family themselves. It'll be up to Shriet's End if they want to execute this guy or not." Marcus nodded. "All right, well, let's try to bring him in alive, and hopefully he has a fair trial." "I don't know. If he looks anything like this drawing, I bet he did it." Jesse shrugged. "Enough with your physiognomy bullshit, man," Jared scoffed. Jesse shook his head. "You don't get it, man. It's never let me down. People look like what they are. It's not a primitive way of thinking. That's just how it is. And this guy's got the face of a killer." "Well, in any case, let's try and bring him in," Jared said, taking the paper before walking back over to the counter. "You guys want to try and get this done tonight?" "Tonight?" Aaron asked. "You want to go do this now? I ain't going out in the arena right now, man. It's nighttime." Jared shook his head. "No, Not the arena, but maybe looking around the slums a bit. Guys like this are more likely to be active at night, I'm guessing. Taverns will be full, alleys will have eyes, informants will be loose-lipped after a few drinks. He lowered his voice, leaning forward. We move quiet, keep our backs to walls, work the perimeter inward. Standard urban grid search, just medieval. All right, man, fine, but after that, let's take some time to find where we're sleeping. Aaron sighed. We can do both. Eddie nodded. Catch this guy, get some cash, find a good tavern. The squad gave their affirmations, then moved back toward the counter, Jared placing the weathered parchment down in front of Lela. All right, this is the quest we want to take. Chapter 16, Dead or Alive. Jared unfolded the weathered parchment. Have you seen this man? He asked, holding the wanted poster at eye level. The citizen, a short, fat man with ruddy cheeks and watery eyes that couldn't quite focus, swayed slightly as he squinted at the charcoal likeness. His ale-scented breath wafted out heavily with each long exhale, Jared's nose crinkling up under his mask as it bled through the balaclava. After a moment's consideration, the drunk shook his head, jowls quivering. No, sorry, Sonny, I haven't seen him before. There's lots of his type, though, over at the slums, just over there. He gestured with a pudgy, dirt-crusted finger toward a wide alleyway where the cobblestones gave way to packed mud. Through the mouth of the passage, Jared could make out a warren of crumbling stone hovels, their uneven rooflines silhouetted against the night sky. Truth was, Jared already knew the exact location of the slums. He wasn't seeking directions, but conducting a perimeter check, systematically questioning anyone who might have witnessed the suspect's movements in or out of the area. The lack of a name hampered their investigation significantly. A name would have allowed them to ask specific questions about associations, habits, or frequented locations. Instead, they were limited to displaying the charcoal sketch, watching faces for micro-expressions of recognition and hoping someone would volunteer useful information. The fact he wasn't named but drawn implied that the suspect didn't know Mr. Willix. Rather, this seemed to be an in-the-moment attack. Likely a mugging gone wrong, if Jared were to guess. This made the quest more complicated than they had originally anticipated, because all they had to go off of was this man murdered this man with no evidence, no intel on where he could be, no knowledge on who his friends were, nothing. Jared was beginning to think the true murderer fled to the arena. It would be insanely stupid to choose to remain in Shreet's End after killing an upstanding citizen this way. But he had seen criminals do dumber shit than that after committing a crime, so he couldn't know for certain. His guys were at his back, low ready as usual, 3 sets of eyes on the alley mouth. The wall loomed beyond, guarding Shreet's End from the horrors of the night. Darkness pooled between the hovels, broken only by the occasional flicker of candlelight from uncovered windows. Unlike the main streets with their evenly spaced lumina shards, the slums made do with what little illumination the poorest residents could afford. Good old candles. Had there been lumina crystals used for lighting, they probably got scrapped a while ago. These were the slums for a reason, after all. The fantasy world equivalent of tweakers would definitely be in there, along with the murderer they were hunting for. At least he hoped so, anyway, meaning it would be dangerous, even if they weren't looking for a killer. The fat man lurched away, each uneven step sending ripples through his ale-soaked tunic. Don't go in there, he slurred over his shoulder, jabbing a finger toward the slums. They'll cut your purse, or your throat. His voice rose and fell in pitch as he staggered between patches of torchlight, his warnings dissolving into a string of mumbled superstitions about night folk and shadow dealers, until he vanished around the corner, leaving behind only the lingering smell of cheap booze. He folded the paper and put it in his pocket with a sigh. Jared folded the paper and tucked it into his pocket with a sigh. Everyone we've asked claims they haven't seen a thing. We're getting nowhere with this. Eddie looked down the alley. Only one play left, he said, nodding toward the slum entrance. We go in. Find our guy. Marcus shook his head. Ed, no warrant means no entry. We can't just breach every shack. Jesse's head snapped up. Wait. His eyes widened as realization struck. Guys, he continued, a grin spreading across his face. This is literally a dream come true. Jared squinted at Jesse. What are you talking about? We don't need a warrant. Jesse's eyes crinkled at the corners, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Not here, not in this world. Jared's eyes widened as the realization hit him. Jesse was right. In Veyland, adventurers operated under different rules than the city guard. There were no warrants needed for quests involving bounties. Jared sifted through Deldy's memories. Adventurers pursuing bounties operated with legal immunity, at least when it came to slum districts, where city guards rarely ventured. It was a bit more complicated in proper society. Bounty hunting required more subtle methods at that point. Some guy living in the slums having just killed someone, though. They were basically dead to rights. Hell, the bounty even said that they could kill him. There'd be less of a reward, sure, but if it were illegal to post such demands on an adventurer's board, then the guild never would have posted it. This meant that the guards had basically already marked this guy for death if they wanted him. Sure, the Willett family had been the one to post the bounty, but the dead or alive stamp on the bounty required official sanction. Only the city guard could authorize lethal force against a citizen of Shreet's End, which meant they'd approved this contract before it ever reached the guild's job board. The law was on their side. They could kick down this suspect's door without a warrant. They just needed to be sure which of these hovels was the right one. Jesse then gave a deep-throated evil laugh as he stared down the alley. "What do you say, boss? Ready to go hunting?" "You seem way too enthusiastic for this, Jesse," Jared noted with a frown. He did have to admit internally, though, the idea of not having to deal with any red tape was oddly freeing in a way. He understood that tape was there for a reason, but there was more flexibility in how they could operate now. "Let's just check out every place," Jesse continued. "No one's going to be able to stop us." Jared sneered. "That doesn't mean that we should terrorize people for no reason." "Yeah, you freak," Eddie huffed. "I didn't say terrorize," Jesse snapped. "But how else are we going to find this guy without questioning? Hell, even if we do question people, they're likely to say they didn't see nothing. We know how witnesses in places like this operate. Snitches get stitches. I guarantee it ain't no different here. I say we go building by building. If we can't get cleaner results first, we got to get a higher rank quicker, right? Let's not leave this joint empty-handed. Hell, maybe we should stop back at the guild, see if there's any more bounties for the losers in here. Might as well do a clean sweep." Marcus shook his head. "Jared, if we go breaking into every house in the slums, we're going to cause more problems for ourselves later down the line, especially if we're going to be staying in Shreet's End," he pointed out. "We need to make as few enemies as possible. We got to narrow down which house our suspect is in first. Let's not just break into every single place at random. That's a shitty idea." "What the hell, Mark?" Jesse asked, offended. "It is the shittiest idea you've ever had, and I will be removing your balls after the mission is done. Shame on you." Aaron shook his head. "Sorry, Jess, got to agree with them on this one." He shrugged. "It is a bad idea, and we would cause problems for ourselves doing it that way. We'll focus on this one suspect for now, all right?" Jesse grumbled, but didn't argue the point further. Jared scanned the darkened alley, then checked his team. "Standing here gets us nowhere. Our target might not even be in the slums anymore, could be in the arena already, which means he's either dead or in another city. Either way, he won't be coming back if that's the case." He squared his shoulders. "Door-to-door questioning first, lethal force only if your life depends on it." His voice dropped, taking on the practiced cadence of a pre-mission brief. "Once we locate the residence, we establish perimeter control. If he refuses surrender, we breach. Questions?" The squad's silence answered him. Jared nodded once, sharp. "Let's move out." The squad moved in formation down the alley, each step echoing against worn cobblestones. Jared wrinkled his nose as they crossed the invisible boundary into the slums, that familiar cocktail of waste and mouldering hay that strangely reminded him of home. Dilapidated wood or stone structures crowded the center of the wide lot. Many of these hovels were open to the night, doorless and revealing only darkness within. A worn cobblestone path snaked through the slum's center, creating a rough grid around which the ramshackle dwellings clustered. And it wasn't exactly empty either. The streets here were littered with mean-looking people, all staring at them with disdain. Hunched figures lurked in doorways, their faces half hidden beneath matted hair or threadbare hoods, or gathered around stone fire pits, roasting rats or boiling stews of unknown origin. Jared scanned their faces for the man they were looking for, but couldn't find any matches. It was a good thing their target had that jagged scar on his brow. Without it, he might blend perfectly with the slum's denizens. Most shared the same weathered skin, same granite features chiseled by hardship, same wide eyes, but none bore that particular scar. "Eyes open," Jared ordered. "Moving to question, cover my back." "Copy that," Eddie said, falling in behind Jared. A few steps in, nearby clusters of slum dwellers started showing teeth and whispering. Jared clocked 6 men and 3 women watching from across the street. The men had arms like rope and bad dental work. The women wore tattered shawls, one cradling a crying child. All of them sized up the squad, a few hands drifting below cloak lines in a practiced way that said armed. Jared didn't miss the glint of a broken bottle in another's clenched fist, eyes warning him to stay away. One group quieted as Jared approached, rifle at low ready. "Excuse me," he began, reaching for the paper before producing it. "I'm looking for this man right here," he said, tapping the paper. "Have you seen him around?" The nearest, a large man with red hair and a pockmarked face, shifted his weight and scoffed. His calloused fingers drummed against a stained leather belt as he sized up Jared's tactical gear. "I don't gotta talk to you," he said, spitting a glob of something dark near Jared's boot. "Who even are you anyway? You ain't the guards." "No, we're not the guards," Jared confirmed, keeping his voice level while scanning the man's posture for signs of concealed weapons. "We're bronze-rank adventurers. There's a quest out for this man right here, and we seek to fulfill it." The red-haired man's jaw tightened as he shook his head, revealing a glimpse of blackened teeth. "I don't gotta talk to you." He crossed his arms, turning away slightly. "You already said that," Jared said, voice flat with practiced restraint. "Now quit wasting my time. If you aren't going to talk to us, then don't talk to us." The red-haired man blinked, eyes widening beneath bushy brows, apparently taken aback by the dismissal. "I don't gotta talk to you," he yelled again, spittle flying from his lips, voice rising to carry across the slum. Jared turned away, boots scraping against the gritty cobblestones as he scanned for someone more cooperative. "Hey, didn't you hear me?" The redhead called again, voice cracking slightly. "I said I ain't gotta talk to you." Jared shook his head, baffled. What the hell was that guy's problem? What a moron. A wet, phlegmy voice then called from Jared's left. "Hey, friend." Jared pivoted toward a listing shack where rotted wood planks had been assembled into the worst shit shack Jared had ever seen. A scraggly bearded man with skin like tanned leather leaned against the warped doorframe, beckoning with yellowed, twisted fingers. His eyes, one milky with cataracts, one unnervingly sharp, tracked Jared's movements. "Let me see that picture. Maybe I saw him." He laughed, a sound like dice rattling in a tin cup. Jared hesitated, then flashed the hand signals they'd practiced. 2 fingers circling for perimeter awareness, palm flat for distance control. The squad shifted imperceptibly, covering all angles. He approached the hovel, nose wrinkling at the scent of what he could only describe as fermented BO. The man's gap-toothed smile revealed blackened gums as he extended a trembling hand. "Can I see the picture?" Jared unfolded the parchment. "This is him right here," he said, tapping the sketch. The scraggly man squinted at the parchment, his milky eye catching the light as he leaned forward, gently taking the paper before looking it over. His mouth twitched before splitting into a knowing grin. "Oh, him." His voice rasped like sandpaper as he handed back the parchment. "I know that bastard. Got a name too, which ain't on your fancy paper there." He tapped a yellowed fingernail against the sketch. Changed his whole look since this drawing. After he gutted that fat merchant. Will it, weren't it? He asked before letting out a wet cough. Nobody'd recognize him now with what he's done to his face, but he's here in the slums all right. He glanced sideways, lowering his voice to a whisper that smelled of rotted teeth. "I can point you right to his door, but information like that—" He rubbed his thumb and forefinger together. "Not free." Jared's eyes narrowed. "How much?" The man's grin widened, revealing dark gaps where his molars should have been. 10 Lumina crystals ought to cover it. 10? Jared scoffed. That's the entire quest reward. The informant shrugged bony shoulders beneath his filthy tunic. That's only if you bring him in dead, ain't it? His good eye gleamed. Take him alive and you'll still turn a profit. Jared shook his head, noticing the shadows shifting as slum dwellers edged closer, their hungry gazes fixed on the squad's gear. 5 crystals. That's all we have on us, he lied, voice firm. Better they think the squad was nearly broke than walking treasure chests. The guys already had their weapons half raised, ready to fire the instant one of these people decided to go feral. Much to his surprise, the greasy man jumped up, his joints cracking audibly. Deal, hand them over quickly, he said, proffering a hand with blackened fingernails and rope-like tendons, eyes darting to the other slum denizens. They were beginning to slowly inch towards the squad now, a tightening noose of unwashed bodies. Disperse, or you will be fired upon, Eddie threatened, raising his pepper ball pistol as he and the other men fully leveled their guns. The force of Eddie's shout sent them scattering back like startled cats. Their bravado melted instantly. One man tripped over his own feet, catching himself on a rotting wooden post with a curse. Another's hand froze halfway to the knife at his belt. Drop the knife, Jesse shouted, the man letting out a yelp before dropping it to the cobbles. I'm sorry, he whimpered, taking a few steps back. These slum criminals might have been big fish in this little pond, but not one of them was stupid enough to challenge a squad of adventurers with raised thunder staves, as they would know them. He almost gave the order to start arresting these people. But these crooks weren't who they were here for, and if they brought them to the guards, then… Deldy's memories indicated they'd just be released the next day, not wanting this filth to flood their jails. Jared handed over the crystals. The man plucked them from his palm one by one, holding each up to inspect before tucking them away inside his ragged tunic. Good quality, he wheezed, nodding with satisfaction. The man you seek is Selek, though he calls himself Gauche now. He traced an X shape over his own cheek. Changed his scar, carved it deeper, added another slice here. You'll spot him easy enough. The informant leaned closer. Back of the slums. Tall building, left corner. His voice lowered. Can't say if he's alone, but if he's got friends, they won't just let you walk away with him. Jared nodded. If any of the information that you gave me is false, we will come back for our crystals. Do you understand? He asked. The greasy man just nodded. Oh yes, I understand. Good luck, adventurers. Without another word, Jared set off, the stack falling in tight formation behind him. He glanced back over his shoulder, catching Jesse's vigilant scan. Weapon at low ready, muzzle tracking the ragged men Eddie had scattered like roaches. The slum dwellers hung back, shoulders hunched and eyes narrowed, but Jared noticed 3 of them already circling toward the informant's shack, hands hovering near concealed blades. The old man had retreated inside quickly, shutting the door before the sound of hammering could be heard from within the shack. He'd survived this long for a reason. Probably had an escape route, hidden weapons, or some other insurance against the predators that surrounded him. No one flashed that many crystals openly without a plan for keeping their arse attached afterward. They moved down through the slums for what felt like 10 minutes, ducking beneath laundry lines, strung between leaning buildings, and stepping over piles of filth he didn't wish to know the origin of. The stink of human waste mingled with wood smoke as they reached the back left corner of the district. Like the greasy man said, it was a tall building, relatively speaking, 2 stories of crumbling stone walls patched with scavenged timbers. Its thatched roof sagged inward at odd angles, riddled with holes where rain would pour through unimpeded. Flickering orange candlelight spilled from the gaps between ill-fitted shutters, casting jittery shadows that danced across the mud-slick ground surrounding the structure. Aaron, wedge the back door. Jared whispered, Chris, Jesse, go with him. When you're done, cover the perimeter and one of you keep an eye on the windows. Eddie and Chris with me, less lethal, he said, lowering his rifle before drawing his taser. I'll try to talk him into coming with us first. If that doesn't work or no one answers, we breach and clear. The men all began moving like specters in the night, following Jared's orders as he approached the front door, Chris stacking up on the left, while Eddie stacked on the right. Chris clutched the beanbag shotgun tightly, already half raised. Jared knocked on the door, 3 sharp, authoritative raps that echoed in the narrow alleyway, before taking a calculated step back, just beyond the arc of a potential blade swing. The weathered door creaked open a handspan, revealing a single bloodshot blue eye, its pupil constricting in the as it fixed on Jared. "Who the hell are you?" the man asked, sounding irritated. "Coming to my home in the dead of night, I should gut you for that." "Are you Gauche?" Jared asked, deliberately not using the suspect's old name. "Gauche?" he asked. "What do you want with him?" "I have a business proposal." Jared lied. "Have a good way to make a lot of lumina crystals, but I need some ruthless guys willing to get their hands dirty." "Ain't no gauche lives here. I think you'd be best clearing off, mate, or there'll be trouble." Jared paused before replying. "What if I want trouble?" Metal scraped against metal inside, the unmistakable sound of a door chain being drawn back through a steel track. The weathered door swung inward with a creak, revealing a hulking figure that stood in the doorway, blocking most of the dim candlelight behind him. 6'3" at least, with shoulders that nearly touched both sides of the frame and a neck as thick as a tree stump. His face was unmarred by any X-shaped scar, just pockmarked skin stretched over a heavy brow and jutting jaw. A mane of unkempt black hair hung to his shoulders, greasy and matted in places. The stench of stale alcohol and unwashed body rolled off him in waves. This definitely wasn't Selek, or Gauche, or whatever he called himself now. He glared straight ahead at Jared, not seeming to notice Eddie and Chris just beside the doorway. He hadn't quite crossed the threshold, though, so he couldn't see him. The thug pointed a broad finger at Jared. "You want trouble with me?" he asked. "No, I don't want trouble." Jared continued, noticing Eddie and Chris readying themselves, guns raised. "Just tell Gauche I need to speak with him. Urgently, I know he's here." The man rubbed his chin, glaring at Jared with open disdain. "He's asleep. If you're serious, then come back in the morning." He waved dismissively. Jared grinned beneath his balaclava. "I'm going to need a few more guys than just him. Are you up for it?" he asked. I don't see why not. We ain't cheap, though." He grumbled. "Me and Gauche and 3 of our housemates, but it'll cost you 100 lumina crystals." "Can I meet with you all out here?" he asked. "I'm with the Knotted Veil." That was a lie, but he knew from Deldy's memories that the Knotted Veil were massively influential in the criminal underworld. The man's eyes widened, and he took a step back. "Sorry, but we can't. Please just go." Looks like that was the wrong thing to say. By morning they might even have cleared out of here completely. He couldn't let Gauche escape. "Get on the ground," he shouted, raising his taser. The man lunged for the door, but Jared's finger had already squeezed the trigger. Twin barbs shot out with a crack, trailing hair-thin wires as they punched through the thug's filthy tunic. His massive frame went rigid, muscles seizing as the bolts ripped through him. A guttural sound, half scream, half growl, tore from his throat before his knees buckled and he crashed to the floorboards. Chris moved in, shotgun raised. "Hands above your heads," he shouted as Eddie followed behind, sweeping his pepperball pistol left. Jared rushed forward into the hovel behind them, rolling the man he'd just tased on his side before cuffing his hands, drool leaking down the side of his mouth. Jared's boots sank into spongy floorboards that creaked and gave beneath each step. Candle stubs guttered indented tin holders, their weak light barely illuminating the water stains that stained the ceiling. A 3-legged table tilted against the wall, propped up by a stack of moldy books, their covers unrecognizable. The air tasted of mildew, sweat, and booze, along with something rotting from the small kitchen. Besides that sad table, the sweet, sour stench of meat gone green, mixed with the pungent reek of vegetables, collapsed into slime beneath a colony of buzzing flies that rose and settled in lazy patterns over what might have once been a stew. In the back right corner, a simple staircase with missing steps disappeared into darkness above. A crash from above, bare feet pounding rotted wood as a scrawny man with wild eyes hurtled down the stairs. He froze for half a heartbeat, pupils dilating at the sight of his massive friend convulsing on the floor and the 3 black-clad figures with weapons raised. His throat worked soundlessly before animal instinct took over. He bolted for the back door, his palms slamming against the wood with a hollow thud, then again, harder. The door shuddered but didn't give, Aaron's wedge holding firm as the man's panicked breaths turned to whimpers. "On the ground," Jared ordered, and much to his surprise, the scrawny man obeyed, falling to the floor and curling into a ball. "I got eyes on the stairs," Eddie said, kneeling down in front of it, pistol raised. Chris stacked up behind him, this room now clear. Thank God there weren't any corners on this floor for people to hide behind, would have made this a lot more complicated. Jared ordered the skinny man to put his hands behind his back, clicking his flex cuffs around his wrists as he complied. "Get the hell out of my house!" A man's voice boomed from the top of the stairs. "Who the hell do you think you are?" Jared looked up, seeing another big man with a knife in his grasp. "Drop the knife," Chris shouted. "Now!" "I'll drop it on your neck," he shouted back, rushing down the stairs, knife raised. Chris opened fire immediately, the beanbag round striking the man in the gut and knocking the wind right out of him with a brutal thud, like a fist punching a slab of ham. The criminal dropped the knife, rolling down the stairs in a heap of groaning agony, clutching the spot where he'd been hit and curling into a fetal position, his knees drawn tight against his chest. Jared rushed over, letting his guys cover his back as he arrested him, dragging the groaning man away from the foot of the stairs by his sweat-dampened collar. The flex cuffs made a satisfying zip-click as they tightened around the man's wrists. Jared readied his rifle after ensuring the cuffs were secure, the familiar weight settling against his shoulder as he approached the stairs again, eyes tracking up through the darkness of the second floor as he settled behind Eddie. "We're here for Select. Come down here now. Hands above your head," Jared ordered. "Hell no," a gruff man's voice shouted. "You ain't taking me." That must have been Select, but unless he wanted to descend from the second floor, he was screwed. This was the only path down. Jared couldn't help but shake his head as he heard something thud to the ground outside, hearing Aaron shout for someone to get on the ground before hearing a subtle plink of a taser, along with someone dropping to the ground with a scream of pain. It seemed Selleck had chosen to leap out the window, landing amongst the rest of the squad. Still, there was one more person here apparently, but this wasn't technically an op. The rest of these men weren't on the board, at least from what he had seen. They were definitely criminals, but there was no guarantee that they would get any reward for bringing them in. Hell, the guards probably wouldn't even take them without evidence. Still, better to be safe rather than sorry. "I know there's another one of you up there," Jared called. "Come out with your hands above your head. We won't hurt you if you comply." Silence before a man's voice called back, "Really?" "Yes, really, but keep your hands above your head. Any sudden movements, and we will open fire," Jared shouted. A pause before the voice replied, "All right, I'm coming down," he yelled back, a short man appearing from around the corner, hands above his head. "Walk down slowly," Jared told him. "When you reach the bottom of the stairs, turn around and get on your knees." He complied, stepping down the steps slowly, each creak of weathered wood punctuating his descent. The weak candlelight gradually revealed a face still round with baby fat, patchy stubble attempting to age features that hadn't yet lost their softness. Jared almost groaned aloud. This wasn't a man at all. The kid couldn't have been older than 16, with eyes that darted between the operators with the unmistakable panic of someone who was way in over his head. He nervously knelt in front of the stairs, hands above his head as Jared approached, grabbing his wrists before clicking the cuffs on him. "Anyone else up there?" Jared asked. The boy shook his head. "No, it was just us." "Why are you doing this?" "That isn't your business," Jared replied. "Look, you're too young to throw in with pieces of shit like this. You want my advice? Go do something honest, like cleaning a tavern or something. It's cheap work, sure, but it's better than going down whatever road these morons will take you down." Yes, sir." He nodded, sounding uncertain. Jared sighed. "Let's clear the top floor, then drag these guys out. I'm pretty sure I heard Select get got outside." They moved quickly, clearing the top floor easily before dragging the men outside. Jared saw Ghosh kneeling by Aaron, his face marred by the fresh X on his face. "I'll kill you all," he snapped. "I'll find that Fatas's family, gonna gut 'em and rape 'em, the works. Gonna tear your faces off and make you eat them, then I'll rape your daughters and—" "Shut up, bitch," Jesse shouted, smacking Selleck in the back of the head. "You're so damn annoying." "Jess, that's against ROE," Marcus began before pausing. Jesse's eyes crinkled with joy again. Just because we're out of jurisdiction doesn't mean we should go hitting people when they're down. Jared shook his head. Let's bring him in. Don't hit him anymore. He'll get plenty of that in jail. You're going to get plenty of raped when I break free, Select shouted. I'll scream the whole way there. I won't go easy. It'll be hell for you. Boss, Marcus began, that's going to make getting to the guild a huge pain. Maybe we can go get some of the guards to come with us and escort. People might think we're kidnapping him otherwise. Maybe we can gag him. Cams are off, if you get my drift. Aaron shrugged, Select's eyes going wide. We could just beat him up a bit. Knock him out. Jesse added, I can do it if you don't want to. Perhaps that wasn't a bad idea. This wasn't Los Muertes after all. There wasn't anything legal keeping them from keeping Select's mouth shut. In fact, there were plenty of new doors for compliance now open, though he wouldn't be exploiting the methods Jesse proposed. I don't want to hear you say dumb shit the whole way to the guild. Keep your mouth shut, or I'll find the nastiest, crustiest sock I can and shove it down your throat. He then looked to Eddie, and if you won't be cooperative, I'll let this guy do whatever he wants to you. He looks purty, boss. Eddie grinned, pitching his voice comically low. Real purty. Can I run back in with him real quick? Eddie then leaned down, brushing a hand against Select's jawline and causing him to shudder with revulsion. Just an hour or 5. Depends on if he behaves, Jared said with a grin, looking back to Select. So are you going to behave? Select paused, looking to Eddie before back to Jared and nodding. Jared grinned. Not having cams on allowed him plenty of flexibility with getting criminals to comply. Chapter 17, Rankings. Select kept his mouth shut, Aaron and Jesse hauling him along by the elbows as they went. The streets were quiet, drunkards and guards staring at them with open suspicion. Jared quickly clarified that the man they were taking to the guild was a bounty, and that seemed to clear up any narrowed eyes. He was surprised that the guards didn't want to take him off the squad's hands, but he supposed they wouldn't want to take their proof of completion away from them. They had released the other suspects, reclaiming the flex cuffs and leaving Select's pals groaning in pain. At least the guy Chris had beanbagged had been. It had felt wrong to do that, but again, what was there to do? They couldn't turn them in anywhere without proof of their wrongdoing, and leaving the flex cuffs wasn't an option. He'd have to take a look at the job board again, see if there were any more bounties for people in the slums that looked like them. Jared had a feeling, though, that that wasn't a well they could draw from too many times. Once the neighborhood started associating them with folks being dragged away in the night, it wouldn't look good on their reputations. They'd have to take other quests besides just bounty hunting work in the slums, which meant that eventually they'd need to head out into the arena. That was fine, though. They were more prepared now, they understood what was out there and the best ways to survive its horrors. There could be greater rewards out in the wilderness anyhow. Dungeon clearing could be quite lucrative, loaded with loot free for the taking, and that wasn't counting whatever quest reward that would come with completion. He shocked himself with just how greedy he had become, but they needed to acquire wealth. There was a lot they would need to get done before they could find a way back to Earth. That included finding a place to live, paying for meals, and hopefully one day finding a way to manufacture their own ammo. Machining ammunition wouldn't be easy, if even possible, but the dwarves of Embera had their own guns, after all. Round bullets and black powder, sure, but they were still bullets. Incompatible with their own guns, sure, but if anyone knew how to replicate the ammunition that his squad used, it would be the dwarves. Gagan had taught that the dwarves' ability to learn was second to none, all possessing a photographic memory and an innate understanding of mechanics and other such engineering. There was a small problem with that route too, though. Unfortunately, if the dwarves took their weapons, memorized them, and could replicate the ammo, they could do the same thing for themselves, giving themselves a huge tech advantage over the rest of Veyland. Though, did that really matter in the grand scheme of things? Well, the gargoyles certainly wouldn't like the dwarves suddenly having more power, that was for sure. He grinned beneath his mask as they approached the guild doors. Screwing over the gargoyles while helping themselves out didn't seem all too bad. Select stumbled between them as they pushed through the guild doors. Lela stood frozen behind the counter, her jaw slack and eyes wide as the team approached with their captive. Lela didn't wait for them to reach the counter. Already, she called out, her voice carrying across the guild hall. "You actually caught him." "Yep, this is the guy," Jared said. "He carved up his face to get a new scar, but this is Selek." "Isn't that right, buddy?" Jared asked, turning to him. Selek simply glared in reply. Jared then shrugged, pulling out the bounty paper before putting it next to Selek's face. Lella's eyes darted from the bounty notice to Selek's face, her gaze lingering on the fresh scar. She gave a satisfied nod. "A perfect match," she confirmed, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "Unfortunate timing. We needn't summon the guards." She gestured toward the two uniformed men flanking the archive doorway. "Our current security detail can handle the transfer." One of the guards straightened, his gaze shifting from Lella to Selek. Recognition flashed across his face as his hand instinctively moved to his sword hilt. "The Willet murderer," he said, voice hardening. "Been on our notice board since last harvest moon." He exchanged a meaningful glance with his partner before addressing Lella with practiced deference. "Our relief arrives at the bell, Miss Lella. We'll secure the prisoner and escort him to the holding cells when we depart, with your permission." Lella nodded, her fingers already reaching beneath the counter. "The bounty specified 20 lumina for live capture," she said, glancing at the scowling Selek, "which I see you've managed quite efficiently." She ducked behind the counter, and they heard the scrape of a heavy drawer opening. When she reappeared, she set a cloth sack on the countertop that radiated light through its weave. Blues, reds, and yellows glowing through the fabric. "Nice haul," Eddie noted. "How much higher are we in the rankings now?" Jared asked. "Are we close to advancing up from bronze yet?" Lella's lips pressed into a thin line as she shook her head. "The guild doesn't work that way. Bronze to steel isn't just a matter of completing assignments. It's about proving consistent competence over time. Most adventurers spend seasons, even years, before their first promotion. 2 quests, however successful, barely registers in the ledgers." She tapped her fingers against the counter with finality. "Those are the rules." Jared nodded. "That matches up with what we learned. How much further do we have to go then until we make it to steel rank?" Lella paused before saying, "It's more a matter of guild approval. Senior guild officials review your completed quests, both the difficulty and your execution. They're looking for proof you can handle greater risks. It's why we don't promote adventurers who only take safe assignments, regardless of how many they complete. That's why someone who only retrieves lost pets will remain bronze forever, no matter how many cats they collect." She smiled at him. "In this case, you actually are well on your way. Your record shows diversity of approach, even if your total count stands at 2. Both assignments carried significant risk, yet you executed them with undeniable competence." She leaned forward slightly, lowering her voice. "Risk and reward are proportional in the guild hierarchy. Those who consistently face greater dangers advance more rapidly than those who play it safe." Her eyes met his directly. "Understand?" Jared nodded, weighing her words. "Is there a record for fastest promotion? Someone who set the benchmark for climbing through the ranks?" Lella's eyes narrowed in calculation. "Taylok Nihan holds that distinction. Marajin's father. Made the leap from bronze to steel in under 2 months. Unheard of before him, unmatched since." That was probably why Marajin acted like such a cocky asshole. "Oh well," Jared grinned. "We'll beat that by a month then," he said. "We'll be steel in no time." "Hell yeah, we will," Jesse cheered. "That record is already dead." Jared handed Selek over to the door guards, who had made their way around the counter. He watched them bind the prisoner with thick rope while he retrieved his flex cuffs, tucking them back into his tactical vest with practiced efficiency. "Where did Taylok eventually end up in the rankings?" Jared asked her as the guards dragged Selek away. Lella's eyebrows lifted slightly. "Diamond," she said, her voice dropping to something almost reverential. "The pinnacle of our hierarchy. Silver ranks dine with minor gargles and receive audience in noble houses. Gold ranks command respect, even among the highest gargal families." She straightened her posture unconsciously. "But diamonds, they answer only to the crown. When they walk through a city, guards stand at attention and nobles clear their paths. They command the highest respect you can earn outside of having royal blood." Jared nodded, the implications settling into place. Diamond rank meant political capital, doors that would open, resources they could command, and access to the deeper knowledge of crystal tuning they desperately needed. A viable path home, if all else failed. But the math troubled him. 2 months from bronze to steel was record-breaking speed. Steel to silver, silver to gold, gold to diamond. The progression stretched before him as he imagined the time that would need to go into the climb. A chill ran across his shoulders as he calculated. Years. It would take years, even pushing every advantage. He filed it away. A fallback option, not their primary exfil plan. No matter what, though, he would find a way back to Los Muertes. Chapter 18. Property Guild. Morning sunlight bathed the marketplace as Jared navigated between the crowded stalls. Every vendor had drawn a line of customers, the place humming with commerce. Tons of people crowded the place, long lines breaking up waves of citizens trying to move through the crowd. Eddie and Aaron flanked him while the rest of their team stayed behind to watch their gear at the tavern. Despite leaving most of their equipment back with the other guys, they hadn't come out unarmed, pistols still holstered at their sides. They were mostly window shopping right now, scanning the market's chaotic array of merchandise. Weapon stalls displayed gleaming blades alongside crude wooden practice swords. Apothecaries hawked vials of luminescent potions in impossible colors. Food vendors grilled skewered meats that dripped fat onto open flames, sending aromatic smoke spiraling skyward. The crowd surged around them like an unpredictable tide, locals in homespun tunics jostling against merchants in silks from distant shards. Jared's fingers absently traced the outline of the leather pouch at his belt, heavy with lumina crystals. At the tavern they were staying in, they could lodge there for a year and still have half of their crystals left, assuming they didn't buy any food, of course. Eddie halted abruptly, Aaron and Jared stopping along with him. "You know," he said, rubbing his thumb across the crystal pouch at his belt, "maybe instead of looking for things to buy in the market, we should go look and see if there's any homes we could get." Aaron's eyebrows shot up. "You want to buy a house, man? In this economy?" he asked with a short, incredulous laugh. Eddie crossed his arms, leaning forward slightly. "Dumbass, this ain't back home," he muttered silently, glancing around to ensure no locals overheard. "I bet we could actually buy a place with the crystals we got, and I don't mean a down payment either. I mean in full." Jared then ran a finger across his chin. It wasn't a bad idea, he realized. Taverns were fine and all, but their very nature meant they were less secure. If they had an actual home base to operate from, that would be far more ideal than sleeping in a tavern. The question was, who do they even ask about buying property? That wasn't exactly involved with Gagan's lessons. Thankfully, Deldy's memories came to the rescue. Jared winced as the memories flooded through him, squeezing his eyes shut tightly. It seemed that realtors were still quite real here in Valend. If they wanted to find a home, the best way to do that would be to go and ask a representative at the Property Guild, as it was called. The memories warned him, though, that they were cutthroat and opportunistic people that would try and squeeze out as many crystals from them as they possibly could. Going in to negotiate reasonable home prices might not be so simple, and they might even try to convince them into taking a loan instead of paying up front with cash. Quite predatory, really, but Jared wouldn't be tricked into taking any loans. Aaron's hand settled on Jared's shoulder. "You all right, Jer?" Jared let out a sigh. "Yeah, I'm all right," he exhaled, rubbing his temple. "Deldy was showing me who handles property sales here." "You're really thinking about getting a place?" Aaron rocked back on his heels, voice pitched with surprise. "Genuinely." Jared weighed the crystals in his pouch. "I don't see why not. We've got more than enough for it. Might set us back quite a while, but it's better than just sleeping in taverns." "Yeah, I think it's the right way to go, too." Eddie crossed his arms. "We've got to make sure it's a decently big place. I mean, unless you'll want to be sharing rooms." Aaron's eyes widened in horror. "I ain't sharing a room with you, dude. I've got to have room for when I convince Lela to move in with me." His face split into a grin. "She is my future wife, after all." "She doesn't like you, little bro," Eddie snorted. "Short kings are back in, Ed." Aaron straightened his back. "Ladies are starting to like them more compact." Jared pinched the bridge of his nose. I don't think we should be bringing in any locals at all. It should just be us. Think about it. Eventually, we're going to need to start going out in the arena, all 6 of us, potentially for days at a time. If we leave locals at our house with our equipment, it's not liable to still be there when we get back. Aaron raised an eyebrow. But Jare, we wouldn't even leave all of our stuff when going out on quests. Not unless you're planning on having an armory. Oh, Eddie's eyes lit up. You've got to get a place with an armory or a room we can use as an armory anyway. Jared held up his hands. Look, just calm down. Don't get any ideas yet. We don't even know if there's any homes open yet. How about we head to the property guild and see what's available? All right? Eddie and Aaron nodded. Eddie scanned the market, his head swiveling from side to side. Jared frowned. What are you doing? What do you think I'm doing? Eddie continued searching without breaking his scan. I'm trying to find the guild. Deldy's telling me it's somewhere around here. Aaron groaned. Guys, do we got to start calling it that? Saying Deldy's talking to us. Don't you think that's weird? Kinda, Jared admitted with a half shrug. But I mean, if you think about it, he kinda is telling us about this stuff. Aaron's jaw tightened. No, we're seeing his memories. He's not telling us. Saying he's telling us makes it seem like he's still alive. I don't like that. It just keeps things simple, man. Eddie shot him a look. Don't be such a baby. Eddie pointed straight to a squat, one-story wooden building. That's the property guild right there. Let's go, he said before he began moving toward it, gently pushing his way through the crowd. Eddie didn't have to try that hard to get space made. Most people just looked at him and knew to move out of his path. Not that Eddie would start bowling them over if they didn't move, of course. Jared and Aaron followed after him, the townsfolk staring as they went, at least the ones that noticed them. The doors to the property guild loomed before them, twice Eddie's height and gilded with bronze filigree that caught the midday sun. The heavy oak had been stained a rich mahogany, polished to a gleam that contrasted with the weathered stone facade. 2 large square-paneled windows flanked the entrance, and ornate iron lanterns hung beside the entrance, their glass panels etched with what appeared to be miniature property deeds. There were 2 fist-sized chunks of lumina crystals within, their glow muted by the daylight. Jared had almost expected it to smell like coffee when he walked into the stone lobby, like the real estate offices back home with their cheap K-cups. But instead his nostrils filled with the earthy tang of wet soil. The stone floor beneath their boots had a thin trail of dirt, leading to a counter on the right. Crumbling clods of mud had been tracked in distinctive boot patterns toward the counter, hardening at the edges like miniature mountain ranges. A lone man sat slumped on a bench against the left wall, his eyes half-lidded and jaw slack, drumming thick fingers against a leather-bound portfolio. Across the lobby stretched a polished oak counter, behind which stood a broad-shouldered dwarf with a rust-colored beard braided into 3 thick ropes that fell to his belt. His shrewd eyes tracked their entrance, one bushy eyebrow raised expectantly. Brass nameplates lined the wall behind him, each bearing names in Faesh script, along with a number beneath them. Jared caught Eddie's questioning glance and Aaron's slight nod before they crossed the dirt-streaked floor toward the counter where the dwarf stood, arms folded across his embroidered vest. Jared approached the counter with a practiced calm. Morning, my friends and I are looking to buy property in Shreet's End. What's available? The dwarf's fingers worked methodically through his beard, eyes appraising the 3 men. For a group your size? Several options. 2 or 3 bedroom with a common area would suit you fine. Actually, Aaron interrupted, there's 6 of us. We're an adventuring party. The dwarf paused. Well, I hate to say it then, there's no property in the city currently that can accommodate 6 men, unless you want to share chambers. The only appropriately sized property I can think of to sell you is outside the city walls. In the arena? Eddie asked, baffled. You can't be serious. The dwarf shook his head. No, not the arena. Out in the flocklands, the dwarf clarified. Don't be foolish. Jared's mind flashed with Deldy's memories of the flocklands, rolling fields where gargle nobles kept their indentured servants in clustered cottages. Unlike the arena's constant dangers, this area saw only occasional bandit raids thanks to regular Gargan patrols and its position beyond the mountain pass. Shriet's End served as a natural barrier between these relatively peaceful farmlands and the chaos that lurked in the arena. Jared leaned forward on the counter, resting on his palms. "So, how far is this place from Shriet's End exactly?" The dwarf crossed his arms. "Well, I would have to say about half a day's march on foot, faster on horseback. It's a good property, but it needs some work. I've been taking people out there all week," he grumbled. "I haven't had the time to clean up the dirt from stomping around the countryside." He gestured to the dirt trail. Jared's brow furrowed. "Don't you have a janitor for that?" he asked. "Not anymore," the dwarf grumbled. The fool thought himself too good for simple work and signed up for the Adventurers Guild. "Haven't seen him since, and everyone else thinks they're too good to wield a mop, pa. But never mind that." He grumbled. "I suppose you would like to go visit the property, yes?" "Well, before we do that," Jared interjected, "I want to know how much it would cost to get a place like this. I'd also like to know the floor plan." The dwarf nodded. Of course, just one moment." He told them, stepping off his stool to reach for something under the counter. He came back up quickly, laying out a crinkly piece of yellowed parchment. "Here is a sketch of the layout." Jared's eyes widened as he stared down at the yellowed parchment. The floor plan sprawled across the surface like a maze, rectangular chambers branching into circular towers, long corridors terminating in what appeared to be a great hall, and smaller rooms clustered around what must be a kitchen area. He counted quickly, 23 rooms on the first floor alone. His finger traced upward to a second floor with bedchambers arranged around a central landing, then down to a basement level with large storage rooms and what looked like a wine cellar. A bit big for their needs, with too much empty space, but it was also far away from Shriet's End, on land safe from the arena. The bandits that prowled the flocklands were typically solitary and incredibly rare, so perhaps they could risk leaving it alone while they completed quests. Jared mulled on that. Leaving their base unguarded and open to thieves made his skin crawl. Even with the low crime rate, leaving their gear and supplies unguarded felt like inviting trouble. There had to be a solution to that, but outside of hiring local help, which he wasn't comfortable with, he couldn't really think of anything. Apparently golems costed an entire castle each, so that wasn't an option either. Maybe they should just stick with taverns. He shook his head. No, it should be better to have their own property. They didn't have to rent, they would just need to find a way to secure the house every time they left it alone. He was getting ahead of himself. He hadn't even seen the place yet. This wasn't the time to be thinking about how they would keep the manor secure. The dwarf gestured to the floor plan with a broad sweep of his hand. Nearly 40 acres surrounds the manor. Last owner was Lord Thimbus, minor Gargal nobility who fancied himself a gentleman farmer until the novelty wore off. He cleared his throat. "I should mention that his lordship retained all his flocken and flockettes when he departed. No servants included in the sale price. You'd need to contract those separately." The dwarf's eyes narrowed as he assessed their gear. 6 warriors trying to maintain such an estate without help? That would prove challenging. "We'd like to take a tour," Jared said. The dwarf's eyes gleamed with something predatory. "You seem quite eager," he pointed out, a wide grin on his face. Jared's jaw tightened. Rookie error. The eagerness in his voice might as well have been a flashing mark sign above his head. The dwarf's predatory grin confirmed it. The price would inflate with every nod of approval during the tour. He needed to dial it back, reclaim leverage. Let the property reveal its flaws first, then negotiate from disappointment rather than desire. Standard counterplay, tour the place, point out every crack and stain, then reluctantly consider it, despite the obvious issues. The oldest game in real estate. "Starting price is 500 lumina crystals," the dwarf stated with a false kindly smile. Jared kept his face neutral even as his stomach tightened. 500 lumina crystals would drain their entire operational fund, leaving nothing left in their nest egg. The dwarf's smile widened, revealing a row of gold-capped teeth. "Perhaps you lack the crystals needed. No matter, the Property Guild offers financing arrangements at quite reasonable terms. We could discuss the particulars now if—" "No, that's all right," Eddie interrupted. "We ain't going to be negotiating nothing until after the tour. We got to see if this place is even worth half of your asking price, pal." The dwarf's gold-capped teeth disappeared as his mouth tightened into a thin line. He stared at Eddie, nostrils flaring slightly before his shoulders slumped in resignation. Fine. Tour it is. But wagon fare comes from your crystals. That's non-negotiable. My brother can mind the counter while we're tramping through the countryside. Aaron put up his hand. Hold on. Don't do that just yet. We need to go get our buddies and tell them about this. I'm sure they'd want to go with us too. The dwarf's gold teeth flashed again as he huffed. Northern Gate, 1 hour. After that, my ledger marks this as a failed showing, and the guild extracts a cancellation fee. He tapped his stubby fingers against the yellowed parchment. Time is crystals. The dwarf disappeared through a door at the back of the shop. Jared's knuckles whitened as he gripped the edge of the counter, a familiar tension creeping up his neck. 500 lumina would drain their reserves completely, even with aggressive negotiation. He'd always maintained an emergency fund, first in his savings account, now in a leather pouch at his hip. When this property tour happened, they'd need to point out every flaw and feign disinterest at every turn. The dwarf clearly expected easy marks, but he'd learn quickly that SWAT wouldn't be easily scammed. Jared's jaw tightened as he remembered signing those mortgage papers back home, the crushing weight of 30 years of debt. Not again, not in this world or any other. Chapter 19. Holden Manor. The journey required 2 wagons, enclosed roofed carriages with iron-rimmed wheels and bench seating for 4, upholstered in worn leather that had seen better decades. Ornate but faded scrollwork decorated the lacquered wood panels, and small crystal lanterns hung from hooks at each corner. 1 wagon carried Jared and 3 of his guys, and 1 transported Babby the dwarf and his hired escort, along with the other 2 squad members. At 2 lumina crystals per wagon, the trip to the manor ended up costing them 4 crystals total. It was an obscene price, considering it was 1 crystal per night at the tavern they were staying at. But these weren't standard wagons. They were sturdily built, with a fine team of 4 horses pulling each one along. Still, each crystal was another night they couldn't stay at a tavern. They had spent 4 days of shelter just for this short wagon trip. Jared fingered one of the diamond-shaped lumina crystals in his pocket, mentally converting their funds. 1 polished crystal equaled 20 of the nail-sized rough chunks they called shards, the difference between a 20 and a stack of singles back home. He'd been using shards and crystals interchangeably, but there was a real difference between them. Most of what they had were whole crystals, not shards, as Deldy had been absolutely loaded. The locals weren't much help with terminology either. Most used shards as a catch-all, whether talking about fragments or whole crystals. Only in guild documentation did the distinction matter. A contract offering payment in crystals rather than shards was the difference between a lucrative job and wasting ammunition on something that barely covered their expenses. There were even larger types as well, with the next tier up from crystals, known as lumina gems, being worth 20 crystals each, but those weren't commonly used. They'd been rolling along for a couple of hours now. Babby had said before that this trip would take half a day, though that was on foot. On a wagon, it should be faster, but the horses weren't going much faster than jogging speed. He hoped they could get back to Shreet's End before nightfall, but if they didn't, it wasn't a big deal. There was nothing to worry about, even if they didn't get back in time. The gate guards were more lenient to allowing outsiders in from the flocklands at night. Not only that, they had brought all their tactical gear with them. They didn't want to leave all this stuff back at the tavern where it could be stolen. He didn't trust the locks on those flimsy chests at all. They had eschewed the balaclavas this time, despite wearing everything else. It was a warm day, and the masks might make Babby and the wagon drivers nervous. The guys had seemed interested in acquiring property as well. Marcus, Jesse, and Chris not putting up a fuss whatsoever about it when Jared had proposed the idea. They did bring up the fact that it was a big property, though, and they'd raised concerns about security during their quests. But Jared figured they'd cross that bridge if they came to it. They weren't even certain that they'd buy this place. The team consensus was that, despite the challenges, having their own base would beat bumming out in taverns this whole trip. He leaned back in his wagon seat, letting out a sigh. "Do you guys think this is going to be worth it or what?" Jared asked. Marcus paused and looked up. Well, we need to see the place first. He said the guy is going to try and scam us, right, Babby? Jared nodded. Yeah, he is. Ain't no different than the realtors back home. So like I said, don't be too interested. Look super disappointed in everything. Got it, fellas? Jesse flashed a quick thumbs up. Yeah, I can do that. Honestly, I probably will be disappointed. Depending on how long this place has been abandoned, it's going to have some serious damage. I'm talking black mold, rodents, and other pests. I could probably knock this place down to 250 lumina crystals, if I'm being honest. He flashed a knowing grin. What do you know about negotiating house prices? Marcus asked. How do you know what's bad and what to look out for? Jesse scoffed. Bro, I'm Mexic, Hispanian. He corrected quickly, likely not wanting to risk the wagon driver overhearing that little detail. Mama's cleaning day was serious business. She taught me what to look for. As a quirked-up white boy, my mama put me through cleaning days too. Chris lifted an eyebrow. I can spot mold just as good as you. Yeah, but you're fat and ugly, Jesse retorted, so my opinion is naturally better. I don't know, man. You've been pudging up a bit since we got here. Chris countered, you've been eating too much carne asada. That ain't how it's pronounced, you're so dumb. Jesse laughed. Can you believe this guy? It's one thing to be fat, another to be ugly, but stupid on top of that. Pick a struggle, bro. You got hamster cheeks, bro. Chris grinned. Right, Marcus? Mark just sighed. Not getting involved. You're fat too, Jesse huffed. Imagine not roasting the homies. Yeah, we do it out of love. Chris nodded. With you two, I bet it ain't platonic. Jared chuckled. Shut up, you're weird looking. Jesse jabbed a finger in Jared's nose. Back on topic, though, Chris began. We've got to negotiate from a lower point than that. My mama was a realtor. Best way to negotiate is to start with an absurdly low price and then work up from there. We'll say we'll take it for 100, right? Then he'll counter with a higher price, and we meet somewhere in the middle, thus reducing what we spend. That makes sense. The other three nodded. So, Jared, Chris continued, leaning forward, I'm assuming you're taking control of the negotiations here. Start low, but not so low that you insult him. 100 crystals, 50 if it's really bad. Tell him we need every extra crystal for repairs. And if he pushes back, we'll hit him with, oh well, you have to pay for these repairs then, or something like that. Properties like this are sold as is, you know? Sounds solid. Jared smiled. Marcus folded his arms, brow furrowed. We also have to remember the gargoyle's cut. If we stiff him too much, we make a powerful enemy. We need a good price, but it has to seem fair. This isn't Frischer. This is a real gargoyle with real influence. No counter-scamming. I'm sure Babby knows that, Jared pointed out. He wouldn't allow an offensive price to be given to him because it'd be his neck on the line too. Marcus nodded first, then Chris and Jesse followed with mumbled agreements, all three clearly realizing they'd overlooked the dwarf's position in this transaction. The wagon's wheels ground to a halt beneath them, wooden axles creaking as they settled. Jared adjusted his tactical vest and nodded toward the door. Showtime, gentlemen. The men gave quick nods as Jared reached for the wagon door, but before his fingers touched the handle, it swung open from the outside. A lanky youth with sunken eyes stood in the gap, shoulders slumped beneath a too large uniform. Your destination, sirs, he said with a perfunctory bow. We'll await you here, then return you to Shriet's End once your tour concludes. The poor kid looked totally miserable. If Jared had to guess, he, along with Babby, had been out to this exact property dozens of times already. It was likely getting very droll. Still, could the guy really be complaining? He was making money per trip, right? Or maybe it was his bosses making the money. Ah, well. He stepped out of the wagon, clad in his full tactical gear, minus the balaclava. Wide fields sprawled before him like a sea of untamed wilderness. Knee-high grasses swaying in hypnotic patterns with each breath of wind. The land stretched to the horizon in every direction, uninterrupted by anything taller than a fence post, until his eyes found the neat rows of apple trees behind the manor, their branches heavy with fruit that caught the sunlight in flashes of crimson. The manor itself dominated the landscape, a behemoth of weathered grandeur that must have encompassed at least 8,000 square feet. Its midnight blue exterior had faded to a deep brown where the elements had worn it thin, revealing the silver-grey heartwood beneath. Tall windows punctuated the facade at regular intervals, though several gaped open to the elements, their glass teeth shattered by storms or vandals. The western wall had surrendered to nature entirely, disappearing beneath a spread of green leafy vines that crept upward toward the red-tiled roof. The massive front portico sagged visibly where supporting beams had split under years of neglect, creating a precarious lean that made Jared nervous. One of the double entrance doors hung awkwardly from a single rusted hinge, swinging slightly in the breeze with a mournful creak that echoed across the empty courtyard. The courtyard itself had surrendered to nature's slow invasion. Knee-high weeds thrust between old worn flagstones. At its heart stood a three-tiered fountain where stone figures of women with chipped faces eternally poured nothing from their upturned urns. The black wrought-iron fence that encircled everything, spearheaded and thick, but covered in patches of orange-brown corrosion. Damn, how long had this place been abandoned? Jared's trained eye catalogued each floor with methodical precision, mentally tallying repair costs. Despite how screwed up it was, he could tell that it had once been a nice place to live. Back home, this would have been a property that would have cost millions, even as a fixer-upper. He carefully arranged his features into a mask of disappointment, curling his lip into a practiced sneer as Babby emerged from the wagon. The dwarf's hopeful expression crumbled at Jared's reaction, his shoulders visibly slumping. His guard emerged alongside him, clad in a breastplate with a sword at his belt, staying at Babby's side as he moved. Babby swept his arm toward the dilapidated structure with the flourish of a showman. "Welcome to Holden Manor," his voice echoed across the empty courtyard. "Yes, yes, a few rough patches here and there, nothing a hammer and some nails won't fix." He moved through the open gate, tapping his boot against a weathered cornerstone. Flagstones could use some work, but the foundation for the house, dwarf inspected and perfect as the day it was laid, not a crack to be found. His fingers drummed nervously against his belt as his eyes darted between their faces. "And these lands," he continued, gesturing to the wild grasses bending in the breeze, "rich enough to grow gold if you planted the right seeds, quite the bargain at our asking price." He smiled. The rest of the team filed out of the other wagon behind Babby as they took in the manor's decrepit state. Eddie's face contorted into an exaggerated grimace, his theatrical sigh cutting through the silence and drawing an anxious glance from the dwarf. Chris stalked toward the dwarf, his jaw clenched. 500 lumina crystals? He jabbed a finger toward the crumbling manor, voice rising with each word. "For this death trap? Are you out of your mind? We haven't even seen the inside, and I can tell already that this place isn't worth a quarter of what you're asking." "Well, young man, I'll have you know," Babby began, glaring, "that this is prime real estate. It's secluded, with fantastic soil for farming and plenty of floor space. Besides, the true value lies in the land, not just the manor. Would you say that this land is worth less than 500? "I think not," Babby argued, "but we are not yet to the point of negotiating prices. Come, let us tour the inside of the property, or would you prefer to look around the land itself first?" "We'll take a look at the land first," Jared said, "then we'll tour the inside." Babby's beard twitched with a satisfied nod. "Excellent choice. Let me introduce you to your potential holdings." He swept his stubby arm toward the sprawling fields, his voice taking on the practiced cadence of someone who'd delivered this pitch countless times. "All of this, every blade and bramble you see, comes with the deed." He trudged forward through knee-high grass, stopping at the edge of a barren rectangular plot. "See this cleared section? Prime wheat territory. With proper tending, you'd have your own flour within a season." He rocked back on his heels, eyes darting between their faces. "Imagine never paying another baker for overpriced bread again. Rather appealing, wouldn't you say?" Jesse put on a disinterested face. "I guess so," he said flatly. Babby frowned. "I see. Well, come along then, I will show you the orchard." They followed the dwarf behind the manor, boots crushing the overgrown grass that swished against their tactical pants. The orchard stretched before them, 20 neat rows of gnarled trees, their branches sagging under the weight of crimson-streaked apples that caught the sunlight like polished gems. Jared paused mid-stride, the tactical assessment he'd been running stuttering to a halt. Apples. They certainly looked like apples, with their familiar red skin and woody stems. He ran his fingertips over a nearby leaf from one of the trees as he thought. These trees were identical to the ones back home in California. The realization struck him like a flashbang. This supposedly alien realm mirrored Earth in ways that defied explanation. The grasses beneath his boots, the sparrows darting between branches with familiar chirps, even the damn honeybees buzzing around were all from Earth. He shook his head, Deldy's memories and Gagan's lessons flickering through his mind. Shards were fragments torn from their original worlds, stitched into Faina's patchwork reality. Whatever Valand was, it was just a small piece of a bigger world. But why had it been stolen like this, sectioned away from its original planet? He had gone down this line of thinking before, around when they'd first arrived, but he hadn't put too much thought to it past that. This wasn't the time to be pondering this. He needed to look unimpressed, not contemplative. As you can see, the orchard is quite well done. The trees are all healthy, full. There are even apples right there you can pluck right now and take a bite of, he pointed out, raising his eyebrows. If you wish. Marcus shrugged. I hate apples. Not really my thing. This is kind of taking up a lot of space, and it'll take a lot of work to clear out. Jared could have laughed. Marcus loved eating apples. If they ever really did get this place, there's no way they would cut down these trees. Well, you can do whatever you want with the land after you buy it, Babby said after a moment. Still, the orchard is quite the feature, no? I'm sure the rest of your companions think so. Oh, I'm allergic to apples, Eddie frowned. Yeah, they give me a bad rash. A rash? Babby asked, sounding incredulous. I have never seen a man receive a rash from eating an apple. Are you making a fool of me? Eddie put a hand to his chest and gave a fake gasp. Sir, I wouldn't lie and make a joke about something like this. Eddie lied. It's a serious condition. He shook his head, feigning offense. It's not something I'm proud of. Babby sighed. Very well. Would you like to go see the outbuildings next? Jared nodded. We certainly would. How many are we talking about here? Babby then lit up. There are approximately 4 outbuildings for your servants, of course, unless you wish for them to live within the manor. Calm down, a voice shouted from within the manor. How about you calm down? Everyone glanced at one another before looking back to the manor. What are you going to do, stab me? The voice shouted again. I'll kill you all. The dwarf put his hands on his temples. I do not know who that is, I swear. We don't allow vagrants onto the property. Whoever it is must have broken in. Jared grinned. We'll handle it. We'll take the tour while we remove whoever is inside. I trust that with us having to do this, that there might be some wiggle room in the asking price. Babby babbled. Wait, you... Please remain with me, sir. Babby's hired guard said, These are adventurers. Let them take care of it. You just don't want to risk your own hide, Babby shouted back. Go remove that vagrant this instant. He shook his head. No, sir, I am only to guard your person. I am not a mercenary, nor an adventurer. Babby's beard almost seemed to thin as his head drooped. Jared and his team moved, making their way toward the manor at low ready, not giving the dwarf time to object. Chapter 20. The Thing. Jared moved toward the manor at a brisk pace, Eddie overtaking him to take point at the front of the stack. The decision had been hasty, but Jared recognized the tactical advantage. Clearing the property could strengthen their negotiating position on the purchase price. Not only that, but whoever was inside the manor had no clue about SWAT's presence. They had the element of surprise. It was too good an opportunity to ignore, despite the danger. If you tell me to calm down again, the same voice from earlier yelled, more distant now, I'll gut you. They stacked up beside the manor door, with Eddie and Chris taking up their positions on the left and right-hand side of the doorway. Full sweep, boys, Jared whispered. Dynamic entry, find whoever's yelling first. Are you all ready to take the tour? He asked. Hell yeah, Eddie whispered. Let's get it done. The other men nodded their agreement and Jared smiled. All right, let's push. Eddie nudged the entrance with his shoulder, the warped door drifting inward with an agonizing groan. The hinges held by some miracle, the bottom edge dragging a groove through the dust-caked floor. Eddie swept left, Chris peeled right, and Jared took the center, boots sinking slightly into a layer of must and loose grit, as the rest of the team followed behind him, sweeping their weapons in arcs across the chamber. The manor entrance revealed its former opulence beneath decades of neglect. Marble flooring, once polished to mirror shine, was now dulled under layers of grit and debris. Fractured glass from a fallen chandelier in the center of the chamber glittered among rotting leaves that had blown in through the shattered front windows. Ornate wainscoting, partially intact along the walls, bore water stains that traced irregular patterns down to the baseboards where mold bloomed in the corners. A grand staircase dominated the far wall ahead of them, the wood grey with a coating of dust and chipped in places. These stairs led to his left and right. Dark archways led into adjoining chambers, the heavy oak doors either missing entirely or hanging askew on rusted hinges. Before he could make out more details, a shriek carried down from above. A different voice this time, feminine and high-pitched. "You've gone insane," the woman shouted. "Think about what you're doing." Heavy thuds followed, a chair scraping across floorboards, then toppling with a crack of splitting wood. Frantic footsteps pounded overhead, first a desperate sprint, then a stumbling scramble. Something, either a body or heavy furniture, slammed against the floor above with enough force to dislodge dust that spiraled down from the left walkway of the second floor. They'd need to move up to the second floor, and quickly. Jared signaled the team to advance towards the base of the stairs, wide enough for all 6 of them to move up side by side if they so desired. The whole front chamber of the manor here reminded him of those old survival horror games he used to play as a kid. A part of him warned that they were going to get trapped in here, that if they kept pushing, they'd have to fight against zombies and other mutated creatures. He pushed the childish thought aside. Jared motioned his team forward, and they ascended in tight formation. At the landing, they hung left and continued up a second flight toward the gallery overlooking the entrance. Fractured sunlight spilled through the remains of a window overhead, casting jagged shadows across their path. What was once stained glass was now a pile of colorful rubble that crunched beneath their boots as they moved. The team advanced in formation toward the single open doorway at the gallery's far end. "Get it together, Barbo. This isn't you," a woman's voice shouted, sounding pained. "You aren't you," the man shouted. "I know you aren't real now. Get ready to die." "No," she screeched. Jared motioned Chris forward, and he pushed through the open doorway, shotgun raised. Right as Jared turned the corner, he had already pulled the trigger. The beanbag striking a muscular man, clad in thick leathers square in the gut, knocking the wind out of him and sending him rolling to the floorboards, hacking and coughing. A woman lay splayed out on the ground, wearing armor made from steel-studded leather, her short dark hair matted with blood, a knife lodged deeply in her shoulder. The stack pushed in surgically, Chris and Marcus pouncing on the downed man and apprehending him, while Eddie and Aaron kept their weapons trained on the door they came in from. Jesse and Jared quickly cleared the small room, which must have been a servant's quarters once upon a time, before Jesse ran over to the downed Woma. With a knife sitting just outside of her reach, he kicked the blade away before patting her down quickly, removing a dozen other implements, bottles filled with roiling fluid, a grappling hook, and a belt of throwing knives, all tossed away, save for the bottles, of course. "Thief," she cried, struggling weakly against Jesse's grip. "Unhand me." "This is for our own safety," Jesse told her. "Are you injured anywhere else?" he asked, pulling out some gauze. The woman blinked, looking a bit confused. It was then that Jared realized that her eyes were feline in appearance, a vertical slit down the center, her eyes golden. It wasn't just that. 2 tufts of hair stuck up, or at least what he had assumed was hair. They twitched on their own. It was then he realized that those were a second pair of cat-like ears. That's right. Feanor had people with beast-like characteristics, with feline types being one of the prominent ones. They could see well in the dark, had insanely fast reflexes and odd temperaments, at least from what he could recall from Daldi's memories, along with Gagan's lessons. Collectively, beast people were known as Klua, with cat people being known as Klua Vosh. The Vosh girl looked pale and distressed, her cheeks somewhat sunken, as if she hadn't eaten in days. The man wasn't in much better shape, his cheeks also hollow, eyes wild. It was a good thing they had gotten in here when they did, otherwise she would be dead meat. "She's not real," the man yelled. "She's a fake. Get away from her. She'll kill you." The Catwoman just sobbed, shaking her head. "He's gone insane," she muttered. "Please don't hurt him. He's just confused." Jessie went to work with practiced efficiency, first examining the knife before extracting it with a single fluid motion that made the Catwoman hiss through clenched teeth. Blood welled from the wound, disappearing beneath a coat of gauze. Jessie then began wrapping the bandage in tight, overlapping spirals that immobilized her shoulder without restricting its circulation. Jared kept his weapon at low ready. "Where did you even come from? This place is supposed to be vacant. Are you bandits?" The Catwoman's ears flattened against her skull as she shook her head, wincing through the pain. No, we're not," she insisted, voice cracking. "We're steel-ranked adventurers." Her trembling fingers fumbled for a pendant hanging from her neck. "Look, I have my pendant right here." He has his on his belt. Indeed, there was a steel-gleaming pendant around her neck, and there was one visible at the man's belt. But what were adventurers doing here of all places if they weren't bandits? It didn't make any sense. Babo thrashed against Marcus's grip. "She's not real. You have to believe me." His voice cracked, spittle flying from his lips. "She'll kill us all." He continued to struggle, but Mark and Chris had him pinned completely, face pressing against the floorboards. "Who are you?" the Vosh asked them. "Don't talk in her voice," Babo shouted, enraged. "Don't you dare." "We're bronze-ranked adventurers," Jared explained, ignoring him. "We had come here to tour the property, then we heard you screaming. What happened to you two, and is there anyone else on the premises?" The Catwoman shook her head. "No, we sealed the entrance behind us, thankfully." "The entrance?" Jared asked. "What are you talking about?" "In the lower levels of the manor," she told them. "There is a passage down there. It connects directly to the deepways." Jared almost gasped. The deepways? Jared's mind flashed to Gagan's lessons about those treacherous underground passages, vast networks of tunnels riddled with traps and monsters, stretching like veins beneath Violent's surface. Deldy had spent so many years moving through Violent's treacherous underbelly, and he had nearly died dozens of times during that time. "Jared, do not venture down there. I would hate to lose my wishes in such a horrible place." Jared blinked, shaking his head as a sort of haze flooded his vision. What had he been thinking about? Right, the deepways. There weren't supposed to be many, if any, entrances at all here within the Flocklands, though. Did the Gargal who had owned this manor know about this? Was that why he had moved away, or had he been ignorant? "We had been stuck down there for days," she sighed, shaking her head. "We found a dungeon a few miles from Shriet's End, one no one had ever been in before. Our party thought it would be a good source of loot. We thought we could claim all the treasure inside. After all, it was a virgin dungeon. The potential riches that could be found within were too tantalizing for us to see sense." Her head hung. "We had no idea what we were getting into. The only way we made it out was luck. We found a crack in the wall leading to the cellar here, but the beast, it was behind us." Her voice cracked. "Our friend Bram, he sacrificed himself to keep the monster from reaching us. He caused a cave-in. The entrance to the dungeon is rubble now." She fell into silence. "A monster?" Jared asked. She choked. Yes, there was nothing else down there, nothing but a single beast. It could change its form, come to resemble us, come to know things they shouldn't," she insisted. "It picked us off one by one, replaced us." She looked to Babo. "He has gone mad from his paranoia and now believes that I must be one of the creatures. Please do not hurt him. He's just scared, high-strung." "Kill it now," Babo screamed. "Kill it." The woman flinched before tears began streaming down her face, drawing her knees to her chest. The guys looked at one another, unsure as to what to do. If this was true, then either of these people could actually be a shapeshifter. The man could just be wanting them to kill her before turning on the squad. Yet that wouldn't make sense. Why would he have been pretending that she was an imposter when it had no idea anyone had been around to listen? No, he was a real person. The woman, though, no, he doubted she was a shapeshifter. If she wasn't, then why would she insist that they don't harm Babo, that they keep him alive? He suppressed a sigh. No, they were both who they said they were. Still, to be safe, they would need to restrain the woman for the squad's safety. Right when he was about to give the order, though. "Babo?" A deep voice called up from the lower floor. "Nika? It's me, Bram. I survived." The Catwoman, Nika, let out an animalistic screech of terror, scrambling away from the door and running toward the only window in the chamber. Jesse seized her just before she could burst through it, but she battled against him, strength having returned in full. "No," she wept, "no." Jared's features hardened as he looked to the door, raising his rifle toward the opening. "Shut the door," he ordered in a harsh whisper, Eddie's hand quickly lashing out and pulling it shut. "It's me. Why do you remain silent? Where have you gone?" Bram shouted, sounding frightened. "Please, I'm hurt badly." Nika froze in her struggling, eyes wide as she stared at the door. She opened her mouth, but Jesse clamped a hand over it, the woman looking back up at him. He simply shook his head, slowly, pushing a finger to his lips, eyes wide. Jared took a deep breath as he stared at the closed door. The best thing to do here would be to put down this monster for good in a hail of gunfire. ROE applied to people only, not freaks of nature. But he needed to be sure that this wasn't the real Bram first. The odds were low, but not zero. They would need to find out if this was a monster for sure before they put it down. "You're upstairs, right?" Bram yelled. "I cannot climb the steps, please." "What should we do, Jer?" Eddie asked, not taking his eyes off the door. Jared advanced toward the door. "Switch to lethal." He told him, "If he's a monster, we aren't taking him prisoner."